Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Dickinson family. From the outside, the Dickinson family appeared perfect. They had everything needed for happiness, a loving mother and a devoted father who was willing to do anything for his family's well-being. Although they lived together in a small unit, they harbored many dark secrets that would surprise an outsider. For years, the Dickinson family faced deep-rooted issues that ultimately resulted in brutal murders. This tragic event took place in September 2021. One significant factor that contributed to this horrific outcome was depression, which can be devastating. Today, we will share one of the most heartbreaking stories from the criminal world. Lauren Dickinson, who lived in South Africa. She had a difficult childhood that made it hard for her to connect with teachers and other children. As a result, she often felt isolated and was frequently excluded from holidays and birthday celebrations. This experience contributed to mental health issues that began during her teenage years. Lauren is very anxious and struggles to control her emotions, always seeing threats in everyday situations. Despite her difficulties, she has had a passion for medicine since she was a child. After finishing school, she went to university and eventually became a general practitioner. In the following years, while working, Lauren met Graham, an orthopedic doctor, and they began dating. Despite their different medical specializations, they quickly developed a close bond and fell in love. Graham was outgoing and sociable, which complemented Lauren's more reserved nature. Their relationship seemed harmonious as they balanced each other's weaknesses. With Graham's influence, Lauren became more cheerful and open. They got married in May 2006. At that time, they lived in Pretoria, South Africa, where they built a house on nearly a hectare of land. The house had 4 bedrooms, a gym, a swimming pool. As they started their married life, Lauren shifted her career focus to gynecology and neurological diseases. However, almost from the beginning of her attempts to get pregnant, she decided to put her career on hold to have children. In 2012, Lauren returned to work at the medical center, but she was no longer a practicing physician. Instead, she became a part-time manager and her husband's assistant. The couple faced challenges conceiving due to health issues. Despite these difficulties, they were eager to have children. In 2013, they sought help from fertility specialists. After successful treatment, they welcomed a baby girl named Sarah, but she was born prematurely at 18 weeks. Sadly, Sarah did not survive. The loss was a shock to Lauren, who grieved every day for the next 2 months. The couple continued to consult with fertility specialists but continued to face challenges conceiving. Lauren underwent 17 rounds of IVF, often with low success rates. They eventually decided to use donor eggs and their first daughter, Leanne, was born. The family was very anxious during the pregnancy. Lauren feared another negative outcome and the possibility of losing the baby again. After Leanne was born, Lauren suffered from mental health issues. In 2015, doctors diagnosed her with anxiety, postpartum depression, and major depressive disorder when Leanne was just 18 months old. In response to the situation, Graham took a leave of absence to care for their daughter, and other family members stepped in to help. Following the doctor's advice, Lauren managed her illness with medication. Despite the challenges, the couple remained hopeful about having a second child, and after a few years, Lauren became pregnant again. An ultrasound revealed that she was expecting twins, which excited the parents as their family was set to grow. However, during the examination, they learned that one of the girls had a cleft palate, which caused Lauren significant anxiety. Fortunately, it was later discovered that the condition was not as serious as initially thought, which brought relief to Lauren's family. In 2018, twins Maya and Carla were born earlier than expected when they were in their 5th month. A successful surgery to correct the birth defect was performed. The family handled the ordeal well, After the surgery, Lauren and Graham decided to hire a nanny to help care for the family. The issues surrounding the birth left Lauren feeling anxious and compounded by panic attacks. Her husband Graham described her as an extremely anxious mother, constantly worrying about their children. Lauren was overprotective, often watching their every move, which irritated the kids. Despite these challenges, they managed to overcome many of the difficulties. The Dickinson family was relatively well off, allowing them to hire a maid, gardener, and nanny to help ease the stress on Lauren, who struggled with her mental health. By 2020, the Dickinson family had sold their house and land and moved abroad. They chose to rent a comfortable apartment. This new living situation has significantly improved their family relationships. For the first time in 10 years, Lauren stopped taking antidepressants. By March 2021, she was off all medications and had good mental health. This positive change inspired her to start doing CrossFit at least 3 times a week to stay in shape. In addition, she overcame her eating disorder. This change gave her a more positive outlook on life. Graham noticed positive changes in Lauren and was relieved that she seemed to have overcome her previous health problems. However, their happiness did not last long. By June 2021, Lauren's depression had returned. As a result, Lauren decided to see her psychiatrist again, who prescribed her antidepressants after she described feeling depressed and isolated. The Dickinson family was in a difficult situation. Graham was often home because he did not work, and the children became very attached to him, always wanting him around. As a result, Lauren felt left out and she often argued with her children, who preferred to be with their father. Although they appeared to be a happy family on the surface, things were actually very tense and could explode at any moment. In July 2021, South Africa experienced a series of riots that heightened Lauren's anxiety. The violent protests triggered panic within her family, prompting them to quickly decide to move to New Zealand, which they saw as a quieter and safer place. This move was also strategic, as Graham's parents lived there. However, their hopes were met with numerous challenges. Immigrating under such circumstances carried the risk of being denied a residence permit due to chronic illness or health conditions. To hide her struggles from the authorities, Lauren stopped taking her antidepressants shortly before the move. Her psychiatrist had told her that she was stable and no longer needed medication. Nevertheless, the pressure of the emigration process caused Lauren significant stress, worsened by her insomnia. She was only getting 2 hours of sleep each night because of the increased workload. Before the move, she began taking another medication in August 2021. The Dickinson family left South Africa on August 2nd. Lauren later described the trip as one of the most difficult times of her life, filled with anxiety about their future in New Zealand. Upon arriving in New Zealand, they settled in Timaru, a quiet town of about 30,000. The family's struggles continued. Their living conditions in New Zealand were not much better than in South Africa, with frequent power outages. In addition, Graham had to return to work earlier than expected, adding to the Dickinson family's stress. Graham started working at a hospital in Timaru and started his shift. Lauren hoped that they would have more time to deal with the challenges of moving house and adjusting to a new. Lauren felt overwhelmed with family issues and was left to care for 3 young children on her own without any support. On the appointed day, the Dickinson family went to the immigration office and were selected as potential citizens, while many other families faced rejection. Their application was accepted and they were told to wait for a response. The couple then went to a local Christian school to enroll their child in kindergarten. Graham noticed that during this time, Lauren seemed particularly sad, as if a dark cloud was hanging over her. She seemed far from the cheerful person who shared her life on social media. Even the smallest setback would send her spiraling deeper into depression. During this challenging period, Lauren kept in touch with her new friend Letitia through social media. She attempted to call Letitia, who had recently moved, to invite her to dinner, but her messages went unanswered. Meanwhile, Lauren and her spouse were looking for a rental property, but all the houses within their budget were in poor condition. They were temporarily staying in a house provided by the hospital, which only added to Lauren's stress as she was already feeling overwhelmed. However, on the night of September 14, 2021, Lauren had trouble sleeping. The next day, she had to take Maya and Carla to kindergarten and take Leanne to school. The morning was lively as the children, excited about their early rise and packing, chose their outfits without noticing their Lauren's fatigue. After dropping them off at school, Lauren returned home and lay down to rest. At 10:47 a.m., she received a photo from her kindergarten teacher showing her twins eating lunch at their table. Then Lauren cleaned the house, organizing her belongings because her family had just moved here. After running errands all day, Lauren picked up the girls from daycare and school around 3 p.m. and took them to the playground. Later, at home, Carla threw a tantrum because she missed their dad, who was at work. The other twin, Maya, had recently fallen out of bed and hurt her stitches. The girls cried so much that Lauren felt like a bad mother, trying to comfort them when they ignored her attempts to comfort them. Lauren cooked chicken nuggets for the children, but they were not satisfied with the meal. This led to a breaking point for her. Feeling overwhelmed, Lauren bathed the children and put them to bed around 6 p.m. Although she received several messages from friends in South Africa, she did not have time to reply to all of them. Graham returned home from work, had a quick dinner, and then left for an important meeting at 7 p.m. While he was away, chaos erupted in the house. About 20 minutes after he left, the children began to scream. In an attempt to calm them down, Lauren went to the garage to get some zip ties. Lauren told the children they were going to weave a necklace and placed the zip ties around their necks. No idea what was going on and were happily playing along. However, Leanne was angry with her mother and criticized what she was doing. For Leanne, it was not a game. In a fit of rage, Lauren began suffocating her children with pillows and blankets. She said that she was very sick and would soon die, and that she was killing her children because she was afraid that no one would take care of them. After Lauren believed the children were dead, she attempted to end your life. Lauren cut herself with a knife, but the blade was too dull to cut deeply. Ultimately, she resorted to pills, consuming several large doses of various medications. But these were not enough to end her life. In a moment of confusion, Lauren collapsed on the kitchen floor, lost in her thoughts about her actions. At that moment, Graham came home. He noticed something was wrong with her and asked if she was okay, but she responded in a way he couldn't understand. Sensing something was very wrong, he rushed upstairs to check on the kids. Going up to the room, he hoped everything was okay, but instead, he found the lifeless bodies of his children on the bed. The horrifying reality unfolded before his eyes. In desperation, he sought help. With the help of colleagues at a nearby hospital, he ran out into the street to meet one of them. As he closed the door behind him, the last thing he saw was Lauren lying on the floor with her eyes closed. He didn't know if she was alive, his only concern was his daughters. So he didn't check on Lauren. A friend at the hospital tried to revive the children, but their efforts were in vain. Around 9:40 p.m., neighbors heard a loud noise, which turned out to be a door slamming as Graham rushed outside. Soon after, they heard sobbing and screaming coming from the house. Graham approached the house and admitted that everything was his fault. He was distressed about leaving the children with their mother, who was not mentally stable. Neighbors called emergency services, and the police and ambulance arrived around 10 p.m. Officers discovered the bodies of the murdered children in the house. The twins, Maya and Carla, aged 2, and their 6-year-old, Leanne, had been killed. In the kitchen, police found Lauren alive and conscious. She answered their questions but spoke very softly. The Lauren appeared to be in shock. The police discovered shallow cuts on her hands and forearms. When asked if she had used any illegal drugs that evening, she denied it. Later, police found 9 medication bottles in her trash, along with a package containing hundreds of cable ties. A toxicological examination revealed that her blood did not contain any illegal drugs or alcohol, but it did show high levels of antidepressants, sedatives, and other medications. 40-year-old Lauren was promptly arrested and taken to the hospital for help. The brutal murders of the Dickison family shocked the local community and then spread throughout New Zealand and South Africa. The nanny who worked for the family was speechless when she heard the news. She struggled to accept that it was true. In an interview, the nanny described Lauren, Graham, and their children as an ideal family, saying that she had never witnessed any arguments or conflicts within their household. The nanny firmly believed that Lauren loved her children deeply. She last saw the children in June 2021, when the Dickison family was excited about moving to New Zealand. After Lauren was taken into custody, Graham had to return to South Africa because his visa was expiring in December 2021. He later returned to participate in the trial. He communicated with Lauren and found it hard to believe that she had harmed the children. The day after her arrest, Lauren woke up in the hospital. She was in disbelief about her situation and was even more shocked, and the police entered her room and accused her of killing 3 girls. On September 18th, Lauren Dickison was officially charged with triple murder. Lauren admitted to the crime but stated that she did not want to harm her children. She explained that her actions stemmed from her mental instability and the overwhelming challenges she faced as a mother. Lauren expressed feelings of inadequacy in her parenting, struggling to manage her children, who were often screaming. Eventually, the stress became unbearable for her. She recounted how she killed her children, first Carla, then Leanne, and finally Maya, using pillows and blankets to suffocate them. Although Lauren denied experiencing auditory or visual hallucinations, her lawyer requested a psychiatric evaluation following the preliminary court hearing. During this time, Lauren refused to eat and lost weight, dropping to 47 kilograms. Her physical and mental health issues delayed the case for a month, leading to the rescheduling of the hearing for July 2023, nearly 2 years after the tragic events. In court, Lauren's lawyers sought to focus on her mental health struggles as part of their defense strategy. New Zealand law is very lenient towards those who commit crimes against children, especially in cases of manslaughter, where the offender can receive a suspended sentence. It was important for the defense to show that Lauren's actions were a response to extreme stress, showing that she considered killing her child a form of self-defense. The trial began on July 17, 2023, and lasted 4 weeks. Attorneys have said that Lauren had suffered from years of health problems and struggled with depression. Her mental health struggles led her to consider killing her daughter as a way to deliverance. Tensions had recently escalated between Lauren and her children. They often disobeyed her, which led her to resort to physical punishment and consider sedatives. During the trial, Graham revealed that Lauren had raised concerns about the children's safety on 3 separate occasions, but he had not taken them seriously. Each time he left the house, he felt remorse. In May 2019, Lauren expressed a desire to smother their daughters with pillows. In July 2011, she mentioned wanting to cut their femoral arteries in the bathroom. Despite these alarming statements, they were not considered serious at the time. Lauren has a hard time managing her spoiled twins, expressing her frustration by saying, "Children drive she crazy. They are wild, brazen, and disobedient. She tired of them. She wish I could start over and make different choices." Lauren had to face many difficulties to become a parent, making it difficult for others to believe that she could hurt the children. During the trial, Graham described her difficulties in raising her children. He rarely saw her show affection to her children, and they did not seem to seek her out. This became especially evident when he was home more often and the children clung to him, leaving Lauren without the opportunity to play with them. He sensed something was wrong, but attributed it to her withdrawn personality and inability to participate in fun activities. Graham mentioned that New Zealand did not meet Lauren's expectations. The new country felt completely different from what she had envisioned. This led to a significant cultural shock from everything she encountered. Graham expressed forgiveness towards his wife, believing she was overwhelmed by the challenges she faced. He urged others to forgive her and pray for Lauren. Meanwhile, the prosecutor's office aimed to demonstrate that the triple murder was premeditated. They presented evidence showing that the actions were methodical and intentional, including search engine queries. Lauren had repeatedly searched for lethal doses of various medications for children and methods of strangulation. Additionally, she had confided her disturbing plans to family members on several occasions. The prosecutor argued that Lauren was frustrated and angry with her children because she felt unable to manage them and was resentful towards them, believing that the girls negatively impacted her relationship with her husband. Psychiatrists confirmed that Lauren was likely in an unstable mental state at the time of the crime. Experts noted that Lauren was experiencing significant anxiety during this period. On August 14, 2013, the jury began reviewing the evidence in the case, which included hundreds of pages of research reports and documents from police and experts. After initial deliberations, the jury was unable to reach a consensus on Lauren's guilt. They returned to the office to review detailed police footage of the victim's parents, which took more than 15 hours and lasted 2 days. On August 16, after a hearing at Christchurch, Lauren's attorney, and Tui, said the best place for Lauren to serve her sentence was in hospital, a placement that all 3 mental health professionals who evaluated her agreed with. Lauren Dickinson will be detained at hospital pending assessment before a sentencing date is finalized. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Rhonda Casto. Stephen and Rhonda, both 23, embarked on a hike along the Eagle Creek Trail. Before they started, Rhonda took a photo of Stephen with her cell phone and jokingly texted her mother, saying he might either propose to her or push her off a cliff. The weather was lovely as they continued their walk. However, Stephen later reported that Rhonda's behavior became strange. She asked him what he would do if something happened to her, and if he would care for their daughter. He reassured her that he would. As the weather started to deteriorate, Stephen suggested they head back, but Rhonda did not turn back. Instead, she wrapped a towel around her shoulders and began running down the narrow, slippery path. Stephen alleged that Rhonda lost her footing and fell about 150 feet down the Eagle Creek Trail. After her fall, Stephen claimed he hiked down to the ravine where she landed, but he had no cell service. He tried to call 911 but couldn't get through, so he left her behind, holding her body until he had to leave. Stephen says he hiked to the trailhead, where he finally reached emergency services for help. Later that day, rescuers retrieved Rhonda's body. However, Rhonda's family reported that Stephen showed no emotional response during her memorial service. Stephen disputes this, claiming he was overwhelmed with grief and continuously crying, but often withdraws from others when deeply upset. Following Rhonda's death, Stephen quickly gathered his and his daughter's belongings and relocated to the other side of Oregon to be closer to his own family. This sudden move raised suspicions among Rhonda's family, who began questioning what had transpired between the couple in the moments leading up to Rhonda's death. In 2006, Stephen moved from the United States to China with his young daughter. This bold move marked a fresh start for both of them. Having previously lived in China during his first marriage, Stephen was drawn to the country and its people. He chose to settle in Wuvi, a city about 75 miles outside of Shanghai. Stephen's decision to teach English to Chinese business people proved to be a great opportunity. His daughter, too, quickly adapted to her new life in China, becoming fluent in Mandarin within just 2 months. Both Stephen and his daughter thrived in their new surroundings. During his time in China, Stephen met and fell in love with Landy Yin Yan. Landy formed a strong bond with his daughter, Man, taking on a motherly role that brought them closer together. Stephen was deeply grateful for Landy's influence in his daughter's life. After a year of dating, Stephen proposed to Landy, and she happily accepted. In February 2015, Stephen and his daughter returned to the United States, where the couple planned to get married. Stephen and his fiancée planned to hold 2 wedding ceremonies, one in America and one in China, to include their families and friends from both countries. Stephen and his daughter arrived in the United States a day before his fiancée, flying into San Francisco to catch a connecting flight to Oregon. As they exited the plane, an officer approached Stephen, telling him they needed to detain him due to an issue with his luggage. The police soon arrived, taking Stephen into custody and separating him from his daughter. What Stephen didn't know was that, during his time in China, detectives had been working tirelessly to investigate Rhonda's death. The suspicious circumstances surrounding her fatal fall from Eagle Creek had led them to continue their inquiry, ultimately concluding that Stephen was responsible for her death. Rhonda's mother played a crucial role in keeping the investigation into her daughter's murder open, regularly contacting detectives for updates. Eventually, the police arrested Stephen at an airport for Rhonda's murder and extradited him to Oregon. When questioned, Stephen claimed he thought he was dreaming and hoped to wake up at home in China with his girlfriend Landy. Unfortunately, his nightmare was reality. Initially, Stephen's bail was set at $2 million, and he spent 14 months in jail awaiting trial. However, the judge later reduced his bail to $250,000, which his attorney secured, and Stephen was released with an ankle monitor. Rhonda's family was overjoyed to learn of Stephen's arrest, knowing justice was finally being served. The arrest brought relief and comfort to Rhonda's loved ones, who had been grieving her loss for years. Stephen's attorney then conducted experiments at Eagle Creek Trail, where Rhonda died, to argue in court that her death was an accidental slip rather than a push by Stephen. The Eagle Creek Trail, where Rhonda fell to her death, is one of the most popular hiking spots in the Columbia River Gorge, known for its breathtaking beauty. During Stephen's preliminary hearings, the medical examiner who performed Rhonda's autopsy revealed a crucial piece of evidence. All of Rhonda's injuries were below the waist. This finding was key to Stephen's defense, as it suggested that Rhonda might have taken her own life. The defense team argued that Rhonda's injuries, including her broken pelvis, were consistent with a feet-first fall, rather than a head-over-heels tumble, which would indicate that she was pushed. Additionally, they presented notes from Rhonda's therapy sessions, which showed that she was depressed, but never expressed suicidal thoughts. Rhonda had previously stated that her relationship with Stephen was unloving. The defense team used this, along with her history of depression, to suggest that Rhonda might have intentionally taken her own life. By presenting this evidence, they hoped to discredit the prosecution's claim that Stephen had pushed Rhonda, resulting in the injuries that ultimately led to her death. Stephen made a claim that Rhonda had suffered from depression and had attempted suicide multiple times before they met, but Rhonda's family disputed this and accused Stephen of lying. They suggested that Stephen was trying to shift the blame onto Rhonda for her death, to distract from his own role in her murder. Stephen also stated that Rhonda had struggled with drug addiction since she was 12, claiming that she had experimented with various substances. However, the medical examiner's report only found slight traces of marijuana and the prescription medication Rhonda was taking for anxiety and depression, which she had been experiencing due to postpartum depression. During the preliminary hearings for Rhonda's murder, disturbing evidence came to light, implicating Stephen in her death. it was revealed that Stephen had been in a romantic relationship with Rhonda's 16-year-old sister, Melanie, despite being in his 30s. This discovery raised serious concerns, given the significant age gap between Stephen and the underage Melanie. The prosecution argued that Stephen's inappropriate relationship with Melanie, his girlfriend Rhonda's sister, could have been a motive for Rhonda's murder. Rhonda had discovered her husband's infidelity, leading to tension and a possible reason to kill her. After Stephen was arrested for Rhonda's murder, he was also charged with multiple counts of sexual assault and sodomy related to his relationship with Melanie. Before his murder trial, in 2005, Stephen pleaded guilty to 2 counts of sexual abuse, admitting to having sexual intercourse with Melanie twice. However, he later claimed that he was forced into making this admission and that it was false. Stephen said he only pleaded guilty because it would allow him to fight for custody of his daughter, and he was desperate to get her back. In contrast, the state alleged that the relationship between Stephen and Melanie lasted for over 4 years. Stephen eventually admitted to having a sexual relationship with Melanie, Rhonda's teenage sister. Rhonda sent a text message to her teenage sister Melanie, expressing her negative feelings towards Stephen. In the message, Rhonda called Stephen a piece of garbage and accused him of using Melanie to hurt her. This suggests that Rhonda was aware of Stephen's manipulative behavior, which her mother confirmed. According to Rhonda's mother, Rhonda loved Melanie and wanted to repair their relationship, which had likely been damaged by Stephen's actions. Evidence presented in court revealed that Stephen's relationship with Rhonda was not as perfect as he claimed. Additionally, the court learned of Stephen's disturbing past, including a deviant sexual history. Specifically, it was revealed that only 6 months after the death of his daughter Rhonda's mother, Stephen was arrested and charged with 5 counts of sexual abuse for allegedly touching a 13-year-old girl. Stephen denied the allegations against him, but later confessed to sending inappropriate text messages and a photo to the victim, admitting his actions were wrong and pleading guilty to sexual harassment. In court, evidence presented included photos of Rhonda's bruised back, taken by herself. Rhonda's friend testified that she had overheard arguments between Rhonda and Stephen when they were on the phone. Additionally, Stephen's ex-wife testified that he had previously attempted to harm her. Despite denying the allegations, Stephen was not charged in China. Rhonda's family, however, remains convinced that Stephen was responsible for her death, believing he was motivated by a life insurance policy he had taken out on her, which he had recently increased. Her mother shared her concerns, revealing that Stephen had suffered significant financial losses from day trading the previous year and was struggling financially. Additionally, those who knew Rhonda well can confirm that she adored her 9-month-old daughter, and it's unthinkable that she would have ended her own life by jumping from Eagle Creek in May 2017. Rhonda's family was stunned to learn that the state had reached a settlement with the defense, resulting in Stephen pleading guilty to criminally negligent homicide, a lesser charge than murder. Despite believing that Stephen had murdered Rhonda, the state's case was weak due to a lack of physical evidence proving he had pushed her from the Eagle Creek Trail. Stephen received credit for time served while awaiting trial, but was required to remain on parole for 3 years. After his release, Rhonda's family and friends felt that justice had not been served, believing Stephen should have faced harsher consequences for his actions. At Stephen's sentencing hearing, Rhonda's sister delivered an emotional impact statement, condemning Stephen for destroying their family and causing immense pain and sorrow. Rhonda's mother also spoke, expressing her bewilderment and frustration, saying that Stephen's actions had shattered their family and left them heartbroken. Stephen said he didn't push Rhonda, but took a deal because he was running out of time to regain custody of his daughter. He claimed he was willing to accept the consequences for his actions to protect his child. However, Rhonda's family and friends didn't believe him. In a 2018 interview, Stephen made a shocking claim about Rhonda's death. He said that when he found her on Eagle Creek Trail, she was still alive. The interviewer asked if Stephen had ended Rhonda's life to spare her further suffering. Stephen responded by asking a hypothetical question: if you shoot a suffering fellow soldier to end their pain, is that murder? He suggested that in some cases, such an act could be seen as justified, although still a form of homicide. While Stephen never directly admitted to harming Rhonda, his comments hinted at the possibility of his involvement in her death. Rhonda's mother applied for Social Security survivor benefits in 2017 on behalf of Rhonda's infant daughter. She claimed the child lived with her and promised to use the funds solely for the baby's care. However, the state accused her of fraud, alleging that between 2010 and 2014, the child actually lived with her father, Stephen, not with Rhonda's mother as claimed. The state charged Rhonda's mother with stealing nearly $40,000 in government funds over 5 years. Her defense team argued that she was trying to prevent Stephen from gaining custody of his daughter and accessing a $1 million life insurance policy he had taken out on Rhonda's life. The defense also highlighted Rhonda's mother's struggle with depression, which worsened after Rhonda's death. They claim that she used marijuana to cope with her grief, which impaired her judgment and clouded her thinking. Rhonda's 53-year-old mother was sentenced to a month in a halfway house and 3 years of probation for stealing government funds. She had pleaded guilty to the crime and was also ordered to repay the $39,100 she stole. Rhonda and Stephen's daughter was placed in foster care in October 2015, after the Department of Human Services took custody of her. This happened because Stephen pleaded guilty to sexually abusing a 13-year-old girl, which led an Oregon court to terminate his parental rights. However, Stephen is appealing this decision. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kaylee Mandadi. Kaylee Anita Mandadi was born on August 26, 1998, in Webster to Tak Mandadi and Allison Steele. The family was well off, with Allison being a scientist and Tak working as an international executive director at MGM Resorts. After her parents divorced, Allison remarried NASA engineer Lawrence Butin, who lived in Houston. Despite her parents' separation, Kaylee maintained a strong relationship with her father, regularly communicating with him. Her stepfather also adored Kaylee and became like a second dad to her. Kaylee was not only a grateful and loving daughter and granddaughter, but also an excellent student, team member, sister, and friend, known for her infectious laughter and kind heart that could light up any room. Kaylee excelled academically and was actively involved in various extracurricular activities in school, including horseback riding, piano playing, and theater performances. She was also a dedicated Girl Scout and enjoyed spending time with her friends and family, whether it was hiking with her parents or running around the neighborhood. After graduating with honors from Clear Creek High School in League City, Texas, in 2016, Kaylee went on to study communications at Trinity University in San Antonio. With her dark hair and radiant beauty, she quickly became popular among her peers, leading the football team's cheerleading squad and making many friends. Kaylee was always eager to try new and exciting things, from exploring uncharted territories to participating in extreme sports. Her love for animals led her to volunteer with an animal therapy group, where she found joy in helping others. During a football game, Kaylee met Mark Houghton, a 22-year-old athlete and professional baseball player. At first, she didn't notice him as she was already smitten with someone else. However, Mark was immediately captivated by her charisma and striking features, particularly her large black eyes. Mark and Kaylee's first 2 meetings didn't go smoothly, but Mark didn't give up. By September 2017, they had officially started dating. From the start, their friends and acquaintances thought they were a mismatched pair because they were both emotional and had short tempers. Their relationship was lacking in compromise and was characterized by heated arguments and confrontations from the beginning. the young couple's passion often turned to jealousy, leading to frequent quarrels. Friends who witnessed their relationship reported that Kaylee often had bruises on her arms and legs. A close friend shared a particularly disturbing incident in which Kaylee was too afraid to retrieve her phone from Mark and asked the friend to do it for her. Things eventually escalated to a frightening point where Mark became aggressive, threatened violence, and even pulled out a gun. Kaylee was aware that her boyfriend Mark had a jealous temper, and their loud arguments were frequent. Although she never wanted their fights to be public knowledge, she acknowledged that she wasn't blameless in their disputes. However, on September 24, 2017, her roommates intervened, calling the police around 1 a.m. after hearing loud noises and Mark yelling threats from Kaylee's room. When the police arrived, they found Mark alone in the room. Kaylee refused to press charges, downplaying the incident as just a lover's quarrel. Nevertheless, her friends suspected that Mark's anger issues were fueled by substance abuse and reported his violent threats, including an incident where he threatened to throw Kaylee off a balcony. Despite their tumultuous relationship, Mark and Kaylee had moments of deep love and affection. However, their bliss was short-lived, as their argument at the Malaluna Music Festival in San Antonio on October 29th, triggered by the unexpected appearance of Kaylee's ex-boyfriend, demonstrated. The fight was so intense that they left the festival early. Mark's black Mercedes arrived at a hospital 6 hours after their friends last saw them. He rushed out of the car, frantically waving and calling for help. In the front seat, medical staff found an unconscious, semi-nude girl. The car was in disarray, with Kaylee's clothes scattered around. She was slumped forward, resembling a lifeless doll. The medical staff rushed Kaylee to the emergency room on a stretcher. Mark told them they had taken illegal substances before attending the festival, which helped doctors treat her for a possible overdose. She was later transferred to a medical facility in Kyle, Texas, where a nurse specializing in intimate assault cases examined her and found additional bruises on her arms, legs, and ear. The autopsy revealed that Kaylee died from blunt force trauma to her face and head, indicating she was a victim of a deadly attack. The police then launched an investigation to find her killer. Mark became the main suspect since he was the last person seen with Kaylee that night. Although there was no concrete evidence linking him to the crime, Mark's behavior during police interviews raised suspicions. He changed his story multiple times, contradicting his initial account. Surveillance footage also showed him and Kaylee at locations he had previously denied being at. Additionally, interviews with Kaylee's friends and family revealed a history of aggressive behavior towards her, with one of her sisters even admitting to being terrified of him. Kaylee's mother, Allison Steele, has filed a lawsuit against Trinity University, accusing the institution of failing to protect her daughter from Mark's attacks. The lawsuit, filed in Becker County District Court, also names Mark Houghton as a defendant. It claims that Mark's assault led to Kaylee's death, motivated by jealousy. The lawsuit alleges that Trinity University's staff, administration, and campus police were aware of Mark's erratic behavior during his relationship with Kaylee. Despite this, the university took no action to protect Kaylee in the weeks leading up to her death, even though Mark had threatened to break her face or cause her serious harm. A Trinity University spokesperson declined to comment on the lawsuit's allegations, citing the ongoing legal process. Mark was banned from campus for a year due to an incident in his dorm room, but he repeatedly violated the ban. During investigations, it was discovered that Mark had a history of violent behavior towards his girlfriend, Kay, including threatening to harm her sisters and others. Her sisters reported that Mark had threatened to throw one sister off a balcony and shoot her ex-boyfriend's brothers. Mark had an arrest warrant issued against him, and he surrendered in February 2018. He faced multiple charges, including criminal acts, intimate violence, and abduction, but pleaded not guilty. The trial regarding Kaylee Mandadi's death began in December 2019. Prosecutors argued that Mark's volatile temper led him to fatally assault Kaylee in a fit of rage, causing her severe injuries. They claimed that Mark then waited 6 hours before taking her to the hospital. Mark's defense team suggested that Kaylee's death might have been caused by factors other than Mark's actions, such as the banned substances found in her system, which could have led to a spike in blood pressure or head trauma during intimate activity. Kaylee's mother described her daughter's injuries as extremely severe, comparable to those sustained from a fall from an airplane. The injuries covered her entire body, from her head to her toes, including bruises, red marks, and scratches. The only areas that were not injured were her back and the back of her legs. Dr. Susanna Dana, the forensic pathologist who performed Kaylee's autopsy, presented graphic evidence, including photographs of the victim's injuries. These images revealed a subdural hematoma, a type of bleeding in the brain typically associated with traumatic brain injury, on the right side of Kaylee's brain. Dr. Dana testified that Kaylee suffered severe cranial and facial injuries, including a dent in her skull and extensive bruising and trauma to her face. She also found bruises on Kaylee's eyelids, jaws, mouth, gums, lips, and cheeks, as well as hemorrhages in both eyes. Dr. William Anderson disagreed with Dr. Dana's conclusion, stating that the autopsy results were inconsistent with the idea that Kaylee was attacked. Instead, he believed that Kaylee's injuries were more likely caused by a fall and subsequent medical treatment. Defense attorney John Hunter argued that the prosecution lacked concrete evidence to explain what happened to Kaylee on the night in question, and that it was impossible to prove Mark's involvement. He highlighted Kaylee's history of drug use, including her prior treatment for substance dependence at a hospital. Jason Wallach, a professor, testified that Kaylee's blood contained a high level of MDMA, also known as ecstasy or Molly, on the evening of October 29, 2017. The concentration of MDMA in her blood suggested that she could have suffered a minor head injury, which could then be exacerbated by the drug into a life-threatening condition. John Hunter suggested that a drug can affect individuals differently, leading to varying physical reactions, such as increased body temperature or electrolyte imbalance, which can cause loss of consciousness. During the trial, Mark Houghton testified that he and Kaylee Mandadi had an argument and engaged in intimate relations in the car before she passed out. He claimed that their intimacy was consensual and involved rough sex, which included strangling her at her request. However, the origin of the bruises on Kaylee's body remained unclear. Kaylee's mother, Allison, was convinced that Mark Houghton was responsible for her daughter's death. Despite being charged with her murder, Mark Houghton maintained his innocence during the 2019 trial. The defense argued that Kaylee's injuries were caused by hospital staff during resuscitation efforts, which led to a mistrial due to the jury's inability to reach a verdict. The case was presided over by Judge Raymond Angeline in the 144th District Court. Following the mistrial, Bexar County District Attorney Joe Gonzalez expressed disappointment and announced that he would review the case. Kaylee's parents decided to conduct their own investigation, focusing on a small bruise near Kaylee's ear. They believed that Mark Houghton might have hit her head against the car window, causing the bruise. Kaylee's parents collected evidence, including autopsy reports and photos, and obtained 3 affidavits under oath. This led to Mark Houghton's arrest on charges of aggravated intimate assault and criminal mischief. The timeline of events presented in the investigation highlighted Mark Houghton's alleged lies and the evidence that led to his arrest. During the trial, prosecutors portrayed Mark Houghton as a manipulative and controlling boyfriend who constantly called Kaylee and took her phone away. 2 weeks before her death, Mark Houghton pushed Kaylee against a brick wall and trashed her dorm room. Kaylee then asked for space, and Mark Houghton began sending her dozens of messages, threatening to end his life. The couple attended a festival where they argued over Kaylee's ex-boyfriend. Mark Houghton then took Kaylee to a deserted parking lot, where they stayed for over an hour. prosecutors suggested that it was there that Mark Houghton attacked and killed Kaylee. Kaylee's family thanked the Texas Rangers for their work in bringing criminal charges against Mark Houghton. The prosecution considered presenting a video recorded by Kaylee's parents, but ultimately withdrew it due to potential complications. Mark Houghton was convicted of aggravated assault, causing harm that led to the death of Kaylee Mandadi. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison with a $110,000 fine and restitution to Kaylee's family. He was also barred from contacting over 20 individuals involved in the case. Now over 30 years old, Mark is serving his sentence in Wilsey County Jail, eligible for parole in 2033. Although the conviction brought some closure to Kaylee's family, they felt the sentence was not enough for their loss. In the second trial, Mark faced additional charges, including aggravated assault and criminally negligent homicide. The prosecution presented a more comprehensive case against Mark, but the family was still dissatisfied with the outcome and sought a retrial. Kaylee's tragic story highlights the devastating impact of violence on young people and her family's quest for justice. Despite the conviction, Kaylee's family felt that the verdict did not serve justice for their daughter. In 2019, Kaylee's mother, Allison Steele, successfully lobbied the Texas legislature to expand the missing persons alert system in Texas. She also founded the nonprofit organization Kaylee's Calling, aiming to consolidate missing persons alert systems. Additionally, she established a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing public information about the Clear Alert, an emergency broadcasting alert in Texas for individuals aged 18 to 64. In 2021, Allison filed a civil lawsuit against Trinity University, alleging negligence in protecting her daughter. She claimed that none of Kaylee's guardians were informed that Mark Houghton had trashed her dorm room, giving him continuous access to her and making her vulnerable to manipulation. Despite being acquitted of the charge of ending a life, Mark was found guilty of aggravated assault, causing bodily harm. The family expressed satisfaction with the verdict, feeling relief that the legal proceedings had concluded, allowing them to begin the healing process. Losing a child is an agonizing ordeal, and sadly, it was a heart-wrenching journey that Kaylee's parents had to endure. Allison said they are still completely devastated by the loss of Kaylee, and asked those of faith to pray for her family, friends, and for justice in this matter. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Banaz Mahmoud. Banaz Mahmoud was born in Iraq in 1985. She grew up in a traditional family with strong religious beliefs. When she was 10, her family moved to the UK, but their cultural values remained unchanged. At 17, Banaz was forced into a marriage with a man 10 years her senior, who spoke no English and was illiterate. The marriage was marked by physical and emotional abuse, which Banaz endured for 2 years before finally finding the courage to leave. Despite her family's disapproval, Banaz started a new life and met a man named Rahmat Suleimani, with whom she fell deeply in love. However, their relationship was kept secret due to the cultural taboos surrounding romance outside of marriage. Tragically, Banaz's family was not willing to let her move on from her past. On January 26, 2006, Rahmat reported Banaz missing to the police, but they didn't take the report seriously, convinced that she was just staying with friends. However, Rahmat persisted, and eventually the police were forced to investigate. Banaz's family had a sinister motive for their behavior, which would ultimately lead to devastating consequences. However, Banaz had found love and happiness with her boyfriend, Rahmat. They had dreams of getting married, having children, and building a happy family life. These fantasies brought Banaz joy and kept her going despite her family's hatred and aggression towards her. Her family had never accepted her husband, and in early October 2005, Banaz noticed that she was being followed by people sent by her father. On October 10, 2005, Banaz went to the police and told them about her life with her husband, the injuries she had suffered, and the surveillance she was under. She shared her fears for her safety and even her life, but the police did not take her statement seriously. For about 2 months, Banaz and Rahmat met secretly, but in early December 2005, they were spotted by people from her clan. This led to a council of male relatives gathering at her family home, where it was decided that Banaz should be killed to restore the family's honor. Banaz overheard this conversation and reported it to the police, but they again did not take her words seriously. 2 weeks later, Banaz's father tricked her into going to a relative's house, where she was attacked. She managed to escape and went to the police, who took her to the hospital. After being discharged, Banaz went to live with Rahmat. However, by mid-January 2006, Banaz's family began urging her to return home to mend their relationship and discuss her marriage to Rahmat. Despite her fears, Banaz agreed to go back to her father's house, believing that her mother would protect her. Before Banaz Mahmud returned to her family's home, she visited the police station to report her concerns and name individuals who might harm her. However, she disappeared on January 22, 2006, and her friend Rahmat was unable to contact her. Rahmat then filed a missing persons report with the police. The police eventually became involved in the case, and Chief Inspector Caroline Good was appointed to lead the investigation. She organized a large-scale search of properties associated with the Mahmud family, suspecting that Banaz might be being held captive. The police questioned Banaz's father, uncle, and ex-husband, as well as 3 of her cousins, Omar Hussein, Muhammad Ali, and Muhammad Hamid, who were also suspects. Despite the efforts of the police, Banaz's family was uncooperative and refused to help with the investigation. The police found no pictures of Banaz at her family's home, and her family members gave contradictory and false statements about her whereabouts. The police arrested 30 people, including Banaz's family members and cousins, but they all tried to slow down the investigation by giving false information. The police obtained permission to install listening devices in the cells of the arrested men, including Banaz's father, uncle, and Muhammad Hamid. The wiretap recordings revealed that the 3 men had no remorse for their actions and were actually proud of what they had done to Banaz. The recordings revealed that on the morning of January 23rd, the Mahmud family deliberately left their home, allowing Ali Hussein and Hamid to enter and attack Banaz. The attack lasted for 2 hours, during which Banaz was subjected to beatings and violence. Finally, Hamid strangled her to death with a cord. The wiretap recordings also revealed that Banaz's cousin, Muhammad Hamid, had been involved in the attack and had threatened Rahmat, which became a turning point in the investigation. The police were horrified as they listened to recordings that detailed the brutal murder of Banaz and the perpetrators' proud descriptions of their actions. The investigation revealed that Banaz's body had been stuffed into a suitcase and taken out of London to a derelict house with a garden in Birmingham. Caroline Good, a detective, matched the information she received with the movement data of the arrested phones and determined the search area. Despite the vastness of the area, the work could take a long time, but the criminals themselves helped the investigation by being talkative and reveling in their actions. During the conversation, one of them mentioned putting a freezer back in its place, which gave Caroline a key lead to follow. A police helicopter was dispatched to search the area, and while circling, it spotted a house with a pile of trash in the backyard, including a white, oblong object that looked like a freezer. When the police inspected the area, they started digging in shifts. As they dug, they eventually reached a depth of about shoulder height. At this point, they were about to give up. But then Caroline Good recalled the words of Muhammad Hamama, who had bragged about burying Banaz so deeply that she would only be discovered if someone tipped them off. Caroline convinced the team to extend the search for 1 more day, and late in the evening of April 28, 2006, the suitcase was found. Banaz's remains were in extremely poor condition, and only dental records and DNA samples could be used to identify her. Her body was folded into a fetal position and hidden in a suitcase, buried under a freezer in the garden of a house in Birmingham. On May 1, 2006, the suspects were charged, but they showed no remorse and were convinced they had done the right thing. After the discovery of Banaz's remains, the police received a flood of people providing alibis for the suspects, claiming they were in public on the day of the alleged murder. In total, 50 people were involved in Banaz's death, and Caroline Good felt anger, disgust, and contempt for the men who participated in the murder. The case eventually went to trial in March 2007, and the prosecutor described the crime as a cold-blooded and heartless execution ordered by Banaz's father and uncle. In June 2007, a jury found all three guilty and sentenced them to life imprisonment with minimum terms ranging from 17 to 23 years. The judge condemned the crime as barbaric and heartless, saying that the father had put his status in society above the life of his own flesh and blood. Muhammad Ali was arrested in Iraq in April 2006 for a crime against a young woman named Banaz Mahmoud. The London police worked to extradite him to the UK. In June 2009, Ali was extradited and eventually sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 21 years. The last of the 5 perpetrators, Omar Hussein, was hiding in the Iraqi countryside. In December 2009, he got into an argument with his brother and was shot in the leg. He was taken to the hospital, where the police arrested him. Initially, Hussein denied being in London in 2005 and therefore couldn't be involved in Banaz's death. However, UK social security records proved that he was receiving refugee benefits at the time, contradicting his claim. In March 2010, Hussein was extradited and later sentenced to life imprisonment. Donna Ammon, who was in the house at the time of Banaz's murder, was sentenced to 8 years in prison for helping to dispose of the victim's body and obstructing justice. A recorded interview at the police station revealed her family's guilt. Banaz had tried to leave her abusive husband several times, but returned to try again at the insistence of her family. The police's indifference to her plight led to her death, which sparked significant changes in how honor killings are handled. An inquiry into police misconduct was launched, and 9 police officers were prosecuted for their inadequate response. 7 received reprimands, and 2 were dismissed. Caroline Good, a determined detective, not only found Banaz's body, but also secured the conviction of her father and uncle and brought back the escaped criminals from Iraq. Unfortunately, this wouldn't bring Banaz back to life or change the fact that her own relatives, who should have protected her, were responsible for her death. Banaz was buried in the Merton and Sutton Joint Cemetery in Morden. A memorial service was held on June 26, 2007, at the MN Auditorium, followed by a granite memorial headstone at her grave. Her family did not attend either service. The memorial was paid for by law enforcement officials working on the Banaz case and the women's rights organization. Ramat Suleimani, Banaz's boyfriend, remained in the UK under the Witness Protection Program but never recovered from her death. In May 2016, 10 years after the crime, he hanged himself, marking his 3rd attempt to end his life. The extent of the problem with police handling of honor crimes is unknown due to the lack of recording requirements. However, estimates suggest that in 2000, there were 5,000 honor killings worldwide. And in 2010, over 2,800 cases of honor-based violence were reported in Iran and Kurdistan. These crimes typically involve women who are perceived to have brought shame to their families or communities. Most cases occur in South Asia or the Middle East, predominantly in Muslim communities. However, cases like that of 19-year-old Banaz Mahmoud, a Kurdish woman living in Britain, highlight the tensions faced by immigrant communities as they struggle to adapt to changing lifestyles. Some groups estimate that thousands of honor crimes go unreported in minority communities in Britain, where women are often taken abroad and forced into marriage or harmed when their modern outlook on life conflicts with their traditional male communities. Banaz Mahmoud, who was murdered in 2006, is a tragic example of this. Her older sister, Beal, urges other women in similar situations not to be afraid to seek help before it's too late. Even today, Beal lives in fear for her life, hiding her identity behind a long black veil that covers her entire body and face, except for her eyes. The story of Banaz Mahmoud is a stark reminder that women who try to escape or live a secret life are constantly in fear of being found and punished. The Metropolitan Police team that investigated Banaz's murder and brought those responsible to justice was awarded for their work in detective investigation. A crucial piece of evidence was a videotape that captured Banaz's nervous testimony, in which she described the violence and oppression she faced at the hands of her abusive husband and the intimidation she suffered from men on the street. She warned of her impending death due to the shame she had brought upon her family. Unfortunately, her warnings were ignored, and she was ultimately killed. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lucy Landry. Lucy Davies was born in 1971 in Rhondda, a county in England. She was the daughter of Roger and Andrea Davies and had a younger sister named Anna. The family lived in a small, tight-knit community of socially purposed housing, surrounded by stunning mountain scenery. Lucy had a happy and carefree childhood, bonding closely with her sister, who shared similar interests. Her parents often mentioned Lucy's infectious joy, which made her a standout student in primary school. Known for her outgoing and likable personality, Lucy quickly won over her teachers and classmates. With her undeniable beauty, she became one of the most popular and admired girls in school. Lucy and her sister Anna shared a passion for ponies, which led their father to enroll them in the local riding club. This experience taught them discipline and showcased their talent, eventually earning them the right to participate in various events and competitions. By the time Lucy started secondary school, she had developed into an exceptional rider. In addition to her riding skills, Lucy was also a talented musician. She took flute and piano lessons, dedicating long hours to practice and master both instruments. Her hard work paid off, and soon she had a comprehensive understanding of classical music. This led to her acceptance into a youth orchestra and her school's choir group. During this time, Lucy developed a romantic interest in Gareth Jenkins, but she kept it a secret. After completing secondary school in 1989, Lucy decided to pursue a music-related career. She enrolled in the University of Warwick to study for a bachelor's degree, hoping to become a music teacher. However, she soon realized that the degree program wasn't what she had expected. Her passion for music remained, but she didn't enjoy the direction of the program. As a result, Lucy changed her plan and opted to study urban planning instead. Around this time, Lucy met Graham McAllister, and they soon discovered that they shared a similar outlook on life, including a passion for art and common interests. A key aspect of their bond was their matching sense of humor. Their relationship developed naturally, and as they made plans for the future, Lucy decided to introduce Gra to her parents, Roger and Andrea. The meeting went well, and Lucy's parents were convinced that Gra was the right person for their daughter. In fact, they were so confident in their relationship that they bought Lucy a house in Coventry, northwest of London. This gift not only provided Lucy with a stable home, free from the uncertainties of renting and moving, but also reflected their wish for her to start a family. Shortly after moving in, Lucy invited Gra to live with her, and they continued their studies together. In 1995, they welcomed their first child, James. Lucy decided to take a break from university to care for him while Gra continued his studies and worked the night shift at the city's postal sorting office. Over time, this arrangement took a toll on Lucy, who felt bored and isolated at home, caring for their child and often separated from her partner for long periods. To alleviate her boredom, Lucy turned to internet chat rooms, seeking to meet new people and find some distraction. One night, Lucy engaged in lively conversations in various online chat rooms, where she encountered Harold Landry, a 53-year-old American from Louisiana. Growing up in a financially struggling family with a dozen siblings, Harold knew from an early age that he had to rely on his own efforts and determination to succeed. To escape poverty, he dedicated himself to hard work from a young age. His big break came when he realized that the key to success in the oil business wasn't owning wells, but providing essential infrastructure to well owners. Consequently, he founded a company specializing in designing and manufacturing hydraulic equipment for major oil companies in the southern United States. As he had predicted, the business made him incredibly wealthy, eventually earning him billionaire status. By then, Harold split his time between his central hobbies and a property on KML Island in Mexico. He had been married and divorced twice, with children from these unions, whose exact number and identities remained private. One thing was certain, however: Harold ensured that his children lacked nothing. A significant event took place in 1992 when Harold, now single, met a woman 20 years younger who was married. Despite her marital status, Harold used his charms to win her over, undeterred by her family's or husband's potential opposition. On February 6, 1994, Harold took her on an outing in New Orleans, hiring a babysitter to watch her children. After their evening together, Harold dropped his lover off at home and offered to drive the babysitter back to her own place. Surprisingly, no one seemed worried that her husband would discover the infidelity and react angrily. However, that's precisely what happened. Outside his wife's residence, Chris Price had been keeping a close eye on her every move. When the third party said goodbye to her, Chris followed him in his car. A short while later, Harold noticed he was being tailed. Acting on instinct, Harold opened the glove compartment, pulled out a firearm he normally kept there, and prepared for a confrontation. When they both stopped at a red light, the situation escalated. According to the babysitter's account, Harold brandished the revolver at Chris and fired. The bullet severely injured Chris, severing an artery in his neck and damaging a nerve connected to his vocal cord. Chris collapsed on the pavement, but luckily, there was a hospital nearby, allowing him to receive prompt medical attention. The doctors were able to save his life. Harold was arrested and charged with attempted murder. His trial took place in 1997. The defense attorney argued in the opening statement that Harold's actions were the result of a tragic and sordid affair involving Chris, and that he had acted out of fear and in self-defense. This strategy led the jury, composed of 4 men and 8 women, to convict Harold of the lesser offense of aggravated assault. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, after an appeal, Harold was granted probation in exchange for a $500 fine and community service. Although he had hoped to be fully exonerated, he thanked his lawyer, Pat, for his efforts. The 2 men subsequently became close friends. After reaching a confidential agreement with Chris, Harold moved to Covington, where he lived a life of luxury, free from financial worries. When he started chatting with Lucy, he was open about his past, sharing stories about his jobs, romantic escapades, and legal issues. However, instead of deterring Lucy, this honesty only strengthened her attraction to him. The two began a captivating online romance, with Harold promising her a highly desirable lifestyle. Eventually, his persistence and persuasive abilities convinced Lucy to end her relationship with Gra, clearing the way for Harold to pursue her without any rival claiming his attention. In the early 2000s, Harold traveled to England to meet Lucy, and she took the opportunity to introduce him to her parents, Roger and Andrea, as her boyfriend. Although they were surprised by the significant age difference, they respected their daughter's decisions and did not object to the relationship. Harold felt fulfilled and fortunate to share his life with Lucy, and he spared no effort to surprise her, whether with luxurious gifts or anything else she desired. In fact, by then, he was so in love that he was already planning to propose marriage. However, he wanted to do it in an ideal setting. To achieve this goal, Harold took Lucy, her son James, and Gra on a trip to Mexico, a place that had become his favorite destination in the world. His longtime friend Pat, who had been his attorney in the past trial, also had an apartment close to his residence, which added to the feeling of comfort. Initially, Harold bought a diamond ring and shared the news with enthusiasm with Pat. However, Pat harbored certain suspicions about Lucy, and as the days passed, he found it strange that she had dedicated a good part of her time in Gra's company. Despite this, Harold was oblivious to it, and ultimately proceeded with his plan to propose. Lucy happily accepted the proposal, and in mid-2003, the couple celebrated their union. Shortly after, Harold surprised Lucy by buying a $1 million property in an exclusive Worcester neighborhood. In this peaceful rural setting, their marriage got off to a prosperous start, helped by their excellent neighbors, Rachel Clark and Stephen Kennedy, with whom they formed a close friendship. Soon, Lucy gave birth to their first daughter, Harriet, which filled both her and Harold with joy. From then on, he devoted himself to the little girl with unwavering energy and commitment. He also maintained a loving relationship with James, treating him like his own son. As time passed, Lucy's workload increased, and her mood began to deteriorate in proportion to Harold's demands. He expected her to constantly adapt to his preferences and obey his requests without question. Lucy, however, had different expectations. This led to rising tensions between them. Lucy was outspoken and unafraid to express her opinions, but Harold was unwilling to compromise. Given their volatile personalities, their arguments frequently escalated into intense fights, followed by reconciliations once the conflict had subsided. The constant disputes that lasted for hours became a familiar background noise in the lives of Rachel and Stephen. They knew that Lucy and Harold's alcoholism fueled their arguments and complaints, which often led to days of not speaking to each other. Lucy reconnected with Gareth, an old friend from secondary school, and they spent hours catching up, occasionally interrupted by their own commitments. One evening, after Harold fell asleep, Lucy stayed on her computer, and it dawned on him that she was unhappy and looking for a distraction, possibly even a replacement, just like she had found him. In the autumn of 2009, Lucy invited Gareth to stay with her. Meanwhile, Harold returned to England, hoping to salvage their marriage, but as soon as he arrived home, Lucy asked him for a divorce. Initially, Harold was devastated, but after a few weeks, he started a new relationship with a woman he met online. Alongside their budding new relationships, divorce negotiations were progressing, and as is often the case, new disputes arose, particularly regarding the family home. Lucy's expectation was to retain the house, thereby guaranteeing a stable living arrangement for their children. However, Harold was adamant that this was not up for discussion. His proposed solution involved offering her financial compensation to purchase a more modest apartment independently. Simultaneously, he made the decision to entirely remove her from his will. Lucy was furious when she learned about her still husband's latest decisions. Her intense hatred towards him led her to share every detail about Harold's past with her son James, holding nothing back. Amidst the tension and complicated situation, Gareth invited her to take a break and spend a few days with him in Wales. Both Lucy and Harold had a serious drinking problem, and their arguments were becoming increasingly violent, leaving their children to suffer in a toxic environment. On the afternoon of February 1st, 2010, Harold had several glasses of wine. When Stephen returned from work, he found a notification that his package had been delivered to the wrong address, the Landrys. Harold invited Stephen in and offered him a glass of wine. This led to a ridiculous argument with Lucy over a piece of furniture she wanted to buy for their upcoming move. The argument quickly turned physical, and in the chaos, Harold grabbed a kitchen utensil and hit Lucy on the cheek. James rushed to the scene of the altercation and found his mother, Lucy, badly injured. He immediately called the police and then turned his attention to ensuring his younger sister's safety. Shortly after, Lucy, realizing she needed help, left the house with her children. Her first thought was to seek refuge at Stephen's house, which was nearby. As she headed in that direction, Harold caught up with her and attacked her with a knife, inflicting multiple injuries. He then left her lying under a bush in the garden, abandoning her. Stephen, alerted by Lucy's screams, rushed outside and found her just a few steps away. Initially, he thought she was unconscious, but quickly realized the gravity of the situation. The police responded promptly to the emergency call and arrived on the scene. They called for paramedics and searched the surrounding area for Harold, but only found the terrified children hiding in the backyard. The paramedics worked quickly to treat Lucy and rushed her to the hospital, where her heart unfortunately stopped beating shortly after arrival. Harold visited Rachel's house and confessed to her that a terrible event had occurred, but he didn't provide any additional information. He handed her 3 bank drafts worth a total of $40,000, some cash, the keys to his car, and several signed blank checks. After that, he headed back home. By then, multiple police patrols were searching for him. They eventually found him walking along the road and arrested him. Roger and Andrea were consumed by grief when they heard the devastating news. In a statement released by the police, they requested that people respect their privacy during this incredibly difficult time following the loss of their daughter. From that point on, their focus shifted to taking care of their grandchildren. The forensic examination revealed that Lucy's death was caused by multiple stab wounds to the chest. With this evidence, combined with James's eyewitness testimony, Harold was charged with murder on February 5, 2010, when he appeared in court. The trial took place in early February 2011, presided over by Judge David Fosin. Unlike previous instances, Pat did not serve as Harold's defender. Instead, attorney Andy Childs took on the role. Despite the challenging task ahead, Childs argued that Harold had been provoked by his wife's intense anger, leaving him no choice but to react as he did. During his emotional testimony, Harold expressed his love for Lucy and regretted his actions. Following the strategy outlined by his lawyer, Harold admitted to involuntary manslaughter, claiming that Lucy had driven him to his limits. To emphasize the brutality of the case, the prosecution presented a detailed animation in court, recreating the multiple injuries the victim suffered. This graphic presentation shocked those present in the courtroom. Ultimately, on February 24, 2011, the jury delivered a verdict after less than 4 hours of deliberation. They found Harold Landry guilty of murdering his 38-year-old wife, Lucy Landry, when he was 64 years old. The next day, the judge imposed the sentence. He strongly condemned Harold's actions, calling them indescribable and unforgivable. The judge rejected Harold's claims that Lucy may have provoked him, seeing them as a desperate attempt to avoid blame. As a result, Harold received a life sentence with a minimum term of 16 years before being eligible for parole. By the time he would be eligible, he would be over 80 years old. Lucy's loved ones expressed gratitude, not only for the resolution of the case, but also for the judge's thoughtful comments, which they felt accurately reflected their own emotions. They acknowledged that the sentence brought some sense of relief from their pain, although they recognized that no length of sentence could restore Lucy's life, and they would need to come to terms with this difficult reality. Harold, on the other hand, maintained his claim of innocence, stating that he hoped to appeal the sentence in the future. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Yarborough. Sarah Yarborough was born in Portland on June 12, 1975. Shortly after, her parents relocated to Federal Way, a suburb of Seattle, where she grew up with 2 siblings, forming a strong bond with her youngest brother. From an early age, Sarah demonstrated a keen interest in music and ballet, spending considerable time honing her skills. Her academic prowess earned her a spot in a school program that allowed her to travel to New Zealand twice. As she entered her teenage years, Sarah joined the cheerleading team at her high school, where she developed a large social circle. She was renowned for her kind and compassionate nature, often lending a helping hand to those in need. On Saturday, December 14, 1991, 16-year-old Sarah was supposed to meet her cheerleading team at the school building, where a bus would pick them up for an event. She drove her father's car to the school, but arrived at the wrong time, thinking the bus would arrive at 8 a.m. when it was actually scheduled for 9 a.m. As her friends gradually arrived at the meeting point, they couldn't find Sarah anywhere. Some students noticed her car in the parking lot, but she wasn't inside. Even when the bus arrived, Sarah was still missing. Her friends found this strange, but they had no way to contact her since they didn't have mobile phones at the time. Around the same time, two 12-year-old children were exploring the wooded area behind the tennis courts on the school grounds when they noticed something unusual. A man emerged from behind the bushes, took a breath, and walked away in the opposite direction. Although the children found this odd, they didn't pay much attention and continued walking. A few meters ahead, they stumbled upon a horrifying sight. A young woman lying unresponsive on the ground, who they thought might be dead. The children rushed back home to tell their parents, and one of the children's parents returned to the scene with them. Meanwhile, the other child's father decided to follow the suspicious man they had seen earlier. The child remembered seeing a car that resembled a Chevrolet Nova leaving the area, and since he lived near the school, his father decided to try to locate that car. After a while, he spotted a similar car, but unfortunately, he quickly lost sight of it and was unable to find it again. At the same time, the parents of the other child rushed to the school, where they discovered the young woman lying on the ground, likely dead. They promptly entered the school building and contacted the police. Upon arrival, the officers confirmed the young woman's death. They also quickly identified her as Sarah. The police deduced that the victim had been strangled, based on the marks on her neck. Some of her personal belongings, including her jacket, underwear, and socks, were found nearby. However, her purse and car keys were discovered in the school parking lot, leading investigators to suspect that the assailant might have attacked her near her vehicle and then dragged her behind the trees. The body was sent to forensic experts for examination, and the police initiated their search for evidence. As a first step, they interviewed everyone who was in the school premises and its surrounding area. The two boys who discovered Sarah provided a rough description of the man who emerged from behind the bushes near her body. They described him as a tall, approximately 20-year-old man with shoulder-length, reddish hair, wearing a dark coat and black trousers. Soon, the police located another witness, and this is where the story takes a surprising turn. A man out for a run observed a strange scene in the same wooded area. He saw a girl lying next to the bushes, with a man hovering over her. The girl was completely still, and the witness initially thought the couple was engaging in intimate behavior in that spot. However, when he ran back through the area in the opposite direction a few minutes later, both the man and the girl were still there, in the same positions. At no point did he suspect that a serious crime was being committed. The witness, a recent immigrant to the United States from a different cultural background, was uncertain about typical behavior in the country. Despite this, he was able to provide the police with a rough description of the attacker, which matched the accounts given by the children who found Sarah's body. The police interviewed dozens of people who had been near the school, but no other useful information came to light. The medical examiners who performed the autopsy on Sarah's body determined that the cause of death was strangulation. It appeared that the attacker had used his own socks to strangle her. A severe head wound was also found, and experts believed that Sarah had lost consciousness due to this blow, which correlated with the runner's account of seeing her lying motionless on the ground. Forensic experts analyzed Sarah's clothing and discovered traces of male DNA on nearly all her garments. However, at that time, in 1991, there was no DNA database to match these samples against, so investigators had to rely on direct comparisons with DNA samples from specific suspects. Another significant finding was that although forensic experts found male DNA on Sarah's clothing, the forensic doctor reported no signs of sexual assault on her body. Based on this information, investigators pieced together their own theory of what happened. Since Sarah had arrived at the school almost an hour early, and she was alone in the parking lot, it's likely that her attacker saw her, waited for her to leave the car, struck her on the head with an object, causing her to lose consciousness. The attacker then dragged her body behind some trees, where it was later found. The assailant removed some of her clothing, engaged in inappropriate acts, and eventually strangled her using her own socks. When the children who found Sarah's body reported the car they thought the attacker had fled in, detectives started searching for a Chevrolet Nova. They soon found one, but the driver proved to have an alibi. He had just delivered donuts that morning, and his DNA didn't match the DNA on Sarah's clothes. It seemed the kids had simply seen the car driving by and mistakenly assumed the killer was inside. In fact, none of them could recall for certain whether they had seen a man get into a car from the bushes. In the days that followed, police continued to search for witnesses and new leads, but made no significant progress. Despite the horror of the event, classes resumed on Monday. The fact that the murder had occurred just a short distance from their school, and the killer remained at large with no known identity, added to the unease. Afraid to walk alone, the girls were escorted to their cars or buses by the boys from the sports teams, ensuring they weren't left alone on the street. Approximately 70 potential witnesses were present at the school and its surroundings on the morning of the incident. Investigators interviewed each of them, but unfortunately, no new information came to light. Based on the accounts of the two children and the runner, a composite sketch of the attacker was created and circulated to local newspapers and television stations. The case received widespread media attention, and over the next few weeks, the police received hundreds of testimony. Each tip was thoroughly investigated, but in every instance, it led to a dead end. One promising lead involved a man who matched the suspect's description and had a criminal record. However, his DNA did not match the sample found on the victim's clothing, and the lead was eventually ruled out. The case remained stagnant for months, with the police dealing with a staggering 4,000 tips, but lacking the resources to effectively follow up on each one. As new cases emerged monthly, the investigators' attention was increasingly divided, further hindering progress on the case. When Sarah's family learned that the police were struggling to manage the influx of tips, they stepped in to help in any way they could. One family member worked for a tech company and successfully lobbied the company's management to lend the police department a powerful computer worth $150,000 in the 1990s. This generous donation allowed the police to centralize and process the leads more efficiently, categorizing them for easy review. Despite their best efforts, however, every lead ultimately led to a dead end, and the case remained stagnant for years to come. 2 years later, Sarah's classmates prepared to graduate, and as a tribute to their friend, they raised a substantial amount of money to create a memorial in her honor. The memorial took the form of a bench featuring a metal casting of Sarah's belongings alongside a poignant photo of her dog reaching for her purse. Although the case was periodically reopened and re-examined in the years that followed, the outcome remained the same. The perpetrator remained at large. During this time, the police conducted thousands of interviews and collected DNA samples from nearly 300 potential suspects. But all these efforts ultimately proved fruitless. In 2011, 20 years after the murder, a detective decided to utilize modern technology to aid in the investigation. He contacted a genetic genealogy company, inquiring if they could help locate relatives of the individual who left DNA on the victim's body. The experts accepted the challenge, but unfortunately, they were unsuccessful. Two main factors contributed to their failure. Firstly, genetic genealogy was still in its early stages, and the experts' capabilities were limited. For instance, they couldn't simultaneously search for both male and female relatives from the same DNA sample. If the DNA was from a male, they could only search for male familial connections, and vice versa. Secondly, legal obstacles hindered their progress, as various laws prohibited the use of genetic data samples to search for relatives of suspects. The researchers the detective approached had spent years tracing the genetic family tree of the British passengers who arrived in the United States on the Mayflower in 1620. By analyzing the DNA of Sarah's attacker, they found a link to one of the ship's passengers, Robert Fuller. However, tracking the attacker's lineage proved extremely difficult, especially considering the passage of time. Although the Mayflower had only around 100 passengers, their descendants now number over 25 million. Despite the initial setback, this was the first time genetic genealogy had been used to solve a crime. The detective gathered available information and identified several local residents with the surname Fuller. He showed them pictures of the men, but none were recognized by the witnesses, including a runner and two men who had stumbled upon the body as children. Next, the detective collected DNA samples from all the local Fullers and sent them to the lab. Although none of the samples matched the attacker's DNA, one surprising discovery emerged. One of the men was a distant descendant of Robert Fuller from the Mayflower. However, he was not the killer and had no knowledge of any distant relatives living nearby. The detective retired in 2017, and a new team of investigators took over the case. In 2011, a company had taken over the study of the DNA sample from the assailant, and the new team reached out to them. Given the significant advancements in genetic material study capabilities, the experts agreed to try to trace the assailant's lineage. Over the next 2 years, they painstakingly worked through public databases to find even the most distant relatives of the assailant, then manually traced their family connections to individuals who lived during the time of Sarah's death. After eliminating several thousand individuals, they finally got a break in September 2019. They identified 2 new potential suspects, brothers Edward and Patrick Nicholas, who were descendants of Robert Fuller. The experts concluded that it was highly probable that a DNA sample found on Sarah's clothing belonged to one of the brothers at the time of the murder. The older brother, Edward, was a career criminal with a long history of violent offenses, and his DNA profile was already in the FBI database, ruling him out as a suspect in Sarah's murder. The younger brother, Patrick Nicholas, had also been arrested multiple times for violent crimes, but his DNA sample was not in the database because it was collected before the DNA profiles of offenders were added. The detectives put 55-year-old Patrick under surveillance right away. 2 days later, they got their chance. Patrick went to the laundromat, and while waiting for his clothes to wash, he stepped outside to smoke a cigarette. When he was done, he carelessly threw the butt on the ground. One of the officers quickly picked it up and put it in an evidence bag, then returned to his car. Patrick repeated this process, stepping outside to smoke again, and this time a cloth handkerchief accidentally fell out of his pocket. The police thought it wise to take this second piece of evidence, just in case they couldn't get a DNA sample from the cigarette butt. As it turned out, the forensic experts had no problem obtaining samples from both items. The next day, they had the long-awaited news for the detective. Patrick's DNA matched the traces found on Sarah's clothing back in 1991 perfectly. The judge immediately issued a warrant for Patrick's arrest, and the police took him into custody. It took investigators 5 days to identify the suspect and formally charge him with murder. Once his biography was made public, an obvious question arose. Why had a man with such a criminal history not been considered a suspect for 28 years? Patrick Nicholas, at 19, had attempted to assault a young woman who managed to escape by jumping into a river and swimming to safety. He was later arrested and spent 4 years in prison. In 1994, he was arrested again for trying to assault a minor, but his DNA was not recorded in any database, because the charge was not serious enough. Over the next 3 decades, his name never surfaced during investigations, and he didn't appear in over 4,000 leads. It was eventually revealed that genetic genealogy experts couldn't trace him back to Robert Fuller because Patrick was adopted and grew up with a different surname. One of the men who discovered Sarah's body when they were children in 1991 immediately asserted that Patrick was undoubtedly the same killer. He admitted that the incident had deeply affected him, as he was only 12 years old when the body was discovered, and the perpetrator had seen his face for many years. The witness lived in constant fear that the killer would come after him, and only after Patrick's arrest did he finally feel safe. Patrick's trial did not start until 2023. Despite claiming innocence, the main piece of evidence, his DNA on the victim's clothing, was a major obstacle. His lawyer attempted to argue that the presence of Patrick's DNA did not necessarily mean he was guilty, but this claim was dismissed. The lawyer also questioned the accuracy of the DNA analysis, but experts deemed this entirely unreliable. In the end, Patrick was found guilty of first-degree murder without premeditation on May 25th. He received a prison sentence of 45 years and 8 months, effectively ensuring he would never be released. At the sentencing, Patrick remained emotionless, in contrast to Sarah's family, who thanked the judge, trial participants, and investigators for bringing the killer to justice after 28 years of evasion. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jonia Berry. Jonia Berry was born on August 26, 1983, and grew up to be a happy and friendly person with a large social circle and a love for parties. During her school days, she was an active member of the local cheerleading team. After completing high school, Jonia enrolled at East Tennessee State University to pursue a degree in psychology and criminology. It was during this period that she met Jason White, and they began dating. The couple got engaged just before graduating in late 2004. At the age of 21, Jonia decided to pursue a master's degree in psychology, which led her to temporarily relocate to Knoxville for her studies. While in Knoxville, she worked part-time at a children's educational center, where she discovered her passion for helping kids. Meanwhile, Jonia's fiancé, Jason, was studying law in a different state. Despite the distance, they remained close and began planning their wedding in Knoxville. Initially, Jonia stayed with her friend, Jason Amami, who had also attended college with her and later moved to Knoxville. They shared a 2-bedroom apartment, and Jason allowed Jonia to stay there until she found her own place to live. Jonia had 2 part-time jobs, one at a jewelry store and the other at a children's hospital. On the Sunday night of December 5th, after finishing her shift at the jewelry store, Jonia went to the mall to do some Christmas shopping. Later, she returned home and spent her evening wrapping presents for the children at the educational center, chatting with her neighbor, and then retreating to her room. Before going to bed, she had a phone conversation with her boyfriend. Around 4 in the morning, Jason Amami was awoken by a scream from a woman. At first, he thought Jonia was having a nightmare, so he went to her room to check on her. However, he was shocked to find a stranger wielding a knife. The intruder attacked Jason, and they engaged in a fierce struggle. Eventually, Jason managed to fend off the attacker and made a dash for the door. He rushed out of the apartment and ran to the nearest convenience store, almost a kilometer away, to call for help. When the store clerk saw Jason, who was covered in blood, they immediately called 911. Jason explained to the police what had happened when they arrived at the scene. At their apartment, the police found Jonia lying in the hallway that connected 5 apartments. She was still alive, but barely conscious. When the police questioned her about the attacker, she could only provide weak clues. The police searched the entire building and the surrounding area, but were unable to find the attacker. They rushed Jonia to the nearest hospital, where despite the doctor's best efforts, they were unable to save her. The doctor reported that she had suffered more than 20 stab wounds, making survival highly unlikely. Jason had 8 wounds from the attacker. Although only one was critical, he received medical attention, and his life was no longer in danger. Meanwhile, the detectives began investigating the crime scene. They discovered blood in the hallway, indicating that Jonia had attempted to seek help from her neighbors, but none of them had opened their doors. Next to Jonia's room, the detectives found the murder weapon, a kitchen knife that belonged to Jason, which the attacker had used with such force that it became bent and damaged. The police discovered blood near the back door of the apartment and on the stairs leading to the street. As Jason and Jonia had exited through the front door, detectives believed the killer likely escaped through the back door in Jason's room. Another clue was found, a partial footprint, possibly left by the attacker when they followed Jason and attacked him. The brutal nature of Jonia's murder led police to suspect a personal motive. Initial investigations focused on Jonia's boyfriend, despite him being approximately 1,000 kilometers away from Knoxville. However, friends and family testified to their wonderful relationship, and he had no apparent reason to commit such a heinous crime. He learned of Jonia's death when her mother called him at 10 a.m. and claimed to have fainted and taken a long time to recover. In his incapacitated state, he required a neighbor's assistance to book a plane ticket and pack his suitcase. After carefully verifying his alibi, investigators concluded he couldn't have physically traveled to Knoxville and back by morning, thus ruling him out as a suspect and shifting their attention to Jonia's neighbor. In contrast to Jonia's boyfriend, who had a solid alibi, this particular neighbor did not, which raised suspicions that he might be the perpetrator. Many friends and family members of Jonia suspected him, with some believing he could be the killer, and others accusing him of leaving Jonia behind as he fled the apartment. The suspicion was so deep-seated that Jonia's parents didn't even want him to attend her funeral. After Jason was released from the hospital, investigators started questioning him. He maintained his original story, stating that he had heard screams, seen an unfamiliar man, and was attacked after successfully fighting off the attacker. Jason rushed to the front door, went out into the street, and sought help from the neighbors. He thought Jonia had also escaped from the apartment because he could no longer hear her screams. However, the police had doubts about the truth of this testimony. Doubts about Jason initially stemmed from his injuries. Although he had 8 wounds, 7 was superficial, and the 8th on his right arm could have been sustained while either defending himself or attacking someone. Furthermore, the absence of forced entry into the apartment suggested that the assailant might have already been inside. Jason claimed to have taken out the trash through the back door that night, but he couldn't recall whether he had locked it. The detectives pressed him further, focusing on which door he used to exit the apartment onto the street. Jason maintained that he had left through the front door, but the police suspected he was lying. If Jason had actually exited through the back door, it would account for the bloodstains near the door leading to the stairs, thereby heightening suspicions against him. Additionally, the police accused him of using and selling illegal drugs and of becoming aggressive when he couldn't get his fix. Jason denied all these allegations, but the investigators continued to level various charges against him. After spending several hours at the police station, the detectives asked Jason to take a polygraph test, and to their surprise, he accepted. An expert was brought in to administer the test, during which Jason was asked a series of leading questions. When the test was over, the investigators told him that he had failed, suggesting that his responses were false. This news caused Jason to become extremely upset, shouting that he was innocent and had no involvement in the crime, that his life was in danger, and that the real perpetrator was still at large. Despite his protests, the detectives remained skeptical. Police couldn't charge Jason due to lack of evidence. Lab analysis of the murder weapon revealed 3 DNA samples: the victim's, Jason's, and an unknown man's. The unknown DNA was also found elsewhere in the apartment. A bloody fingerprint on the knife handle didn't match Jason's. These findings suggested another person was present, but the unknown DNA didn't match any in the database. Despite this, public opinion still doubted Jason's innocence. Jason developed PTSD after a flawed polygraph test led to false accusations. In reality, Jason had severe lung and neck injuries with little hope of recovery. However, due to police report inaccuracies, his treatment was only 25% covered, leaving him in financial distress. After the police stopped suspecting him, they started questioning Jason as a witness. Based on his account, they managed to create a rough description of the attacker. However, the situation was complicated by the fact that Jason didn't get a clear look at the assailant's face. The apartment was dimly lit, and the attacker had pounced on him as soon as he left the room. In Jonia's room, the investigators made an intriguing discovery. A cap was found near the back staircase, along with discs and a stereo player. At first, they thought these items might belong to Jonia or Jason, but Jason denied any connection to them, claiming they were not in his apartment. This led the investigators to suspect that the killer might have left them behind. The police released a rough sketch of the suspect to the media, and after it was published, they received hundreds of leads. Many people reported individuals who vaguely matched the sketch, prompting the detectives to investigate each of these leads. One lead in particular caught their attention: a group of local teenagers known to break into houses to steal. One of these teenagers, 19-year-old Michael, bore a resemblance to the suspect's sketch. The police launched a search for Michael, which was made more complicated by the fact that he was already wanted for theft. With the possibility of his involvement in murder, 2 police units joined the search for Michael. They tracked down Michael and brought him in for questioning about the murder. As soon as he was in custody, the investigators turned their attention to his shoes, which had a tread pattern that was similar to the footprint found at the crime scene. They took DNA and fingerprint samples from Michael and sent them to the lab for analysis. While waiting for the results, they questioned him, and he made a surprising confession. Michael claimed that he and a friend had broken into Gia's apartment that night, intending to steal valuables. However, he said his friend had taken a knife and attacked Gia. But the detectives soon grew suspicious of Michael's story. The details he provided didn't match the evidence they had collected, and there was no sign of 2 strangers at the crime scene. The lab results only added to their doubts. Michael's DNA and fingerprints didn't match those found at the murder scene, and his shoes didn't match the tread pattern found in Gia's room. In the end, the police concluded that Michael had made up the whole story. It may seem strange, but it's not uncommon for people to falsely confess to high-profile crimes, often to get attention or a reward. It's unclear what motivated Michael, but his confession turned out to be completely false. Following the murder, investigators questioned over 1,000 potential suspects and collected around 400 DNA samples. However, none of them matched the evidence found at the crime scene. In an effort to encourage people to come forward with information, a reward was offered early on in the investigation. As time went on, the reward amount increased each month. By December 2005, a year after the murder, the reward had reached $60,000. The state governor also contributed an additional $20,000 from his own funds, drawing even more public attention to the case. Despite the many leads, all of them ultimately led to dead ends. As a result, the case remained unsolved for several years. In 2007, the victims' parents took action seeking changes in state legislation. They found it surprising that the murderer's fingerprints and DNA were not in any databases, considering the brutality of the crime. The parents refused to believe that this was the perpetrator's first offense. They later discovered that, according to Tennessee laws, fingerprints and DNA samples were only collected from people who had been convicted of a crime. Jason's parents were determined to bring about change. They took an active role in shaping a new law that required the collection of DNA samples from all individuals arrested for violent crimes. The authorities backed this initiative, and the law was passed in May 2007. 2 months later, a significant breakthrough occurred in the case. The police arrested 22-year-old Taylor Lee Olson for violating his probation terms. Olson had a lengthy criminal record, mainly involving theft, check forgery, and auto theft, with multiple previous arrests. Remarkably, despite his history of run-ins with the law, his fingerprints and DNA had never been collected. Olson lived with his girlfriend and their newborn daughter, but his criminal activities persisted. It was revealed that Olson had already come to the investigators' attention 5 months earlier when they received a tip about his possible involvement in the murder. However, for reasons unknown, the police had not pursued DNA samples for analysis at that time. Nevertheless, with his new arrest for probation violation, they finally decided to question him about Johnny's case. Olson eventually confessed his involvement in the murder and willingly provided a DNA sample. When the lab results came in, it was confirmed that Taylor's DNA was a complete match with the sample found in the victim's apartment. Following this, they collected his fingerprints, which also matched the fingerprint on the murder weapon. Olson was subsequently arrested, and detectives began to question him. Initially, Olson said he was not guilty, but he eventually decided to confess to his actions. Taylor claimed that on that night he had intended to steal Johnny's car and had entered her apartment through the back door to find the car keys. When he entered her room, she woke up and began screaming. In response, Olson grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed her multiple times. However, he insisted that he hadn't intended to kill anyone, and that it had all occurred accidentally. Detectives had doubts about the truthfulness of some details, and leaned towards believing that Taylor had premeditated the murder. It was possible that he had been stalking the victim for some time, indirectly supported by the fact that Johnny's friends had reported someone following her in a car at the time. No evidence was found to substantiate this, but after Olson's arrest, it seemed increasingly plausible. Despite this, there was little doubt about his culpability, as his DNA and fingerprints were present on the murder weapon, strongly indicating his involvement. Olson's trial was slated to commence in mid-2008, and by that point, he had already retained a lawyer. Apparently, his legal counsel advised him to retract his confession, and Taylor presented a new version of events to the detectives. Now, he claimed that he had entered Johnny's apartment with his friend named Noah Cox. According to this revised account, when Olson entered Gia's room to retrieve the car keys, she allegedly woke up, seized a knife, and stabbed him several times. Olson then fled through the back door, while his friend entered Gia's room, disarmed her, and killed her. This new narrative raised suspicions among the police, as they found no fingerprints or DNA from other individuals at the crime scene, making it appear unlikely that anyone else was involved. Detectives awaited the start of the trial, but it never occurred. On March 28, 2008, Taylor Olson took his own life in his prison cell. Alongside him, several suicide notes were discovered, addressed to his family, Joan, his relatives, and the police. In the note to the detectives, he once again alleged that his friend Noah Cox was the actual perpetrator and also apologized to Gia's family and his own. Detectives continued to believe that Olson was responsible for the murder and repeatedly questioned him, but they found no evidence implicating him. Gia's parents also remained skeptical, believing that Olson was lying. In their view, if Taylor was truly innocent, he wouldn't have taken his own life. It seemed more likely that he simply did not want to spend the rest of his life in prison. Furthermore, for several months following his initial confession, Olson had consistently maintained that he had entered the apartment alone and that there was no one else with him. The sudden change in his story to shift blame onto his friend raised further doubts. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shelby von Holt. Shelby Von Holt was born on September 7, 2000 in Fort Wayne, Indiana, USA, as a cheerful young girl. She was the second of 5 children in her family, which consisted of her mother, Shah Hartman, father, Von Holt, older sister, Peyton Hartman, and younger siblings, Devin Von Holt and Isaac Von Holt. Shelby graduated from Troy Center High School in 2018 and spent the next 2 years working at a steakhouse and other places. During this time, she was contemplating her desired career path and seemed to be leaning towards a therapeutic field, although she had not yet decided on the exact specialty. As a 20-year-old, Shelby was living life to the fullest, known for her cheerful personality that made her the life of every party. She loved to smile, dance, sing, and spend time with friends. Notably, she was living independently, although the reasons for this were unclear. While she was not active on most social media platforms, she frequently posted cheerful photos on Facebook, many of which featured moments shared with her young niece, Camila, who is the daughter of her older sister, Peyton. According to her mother, Shelby met Valerie Rose Hardick, a 22-year-old woman, on Facebook. Although they reportedly did not have a close relationship, Valerie's life is shrouded in mystery, with rumors of a troubled childhood, questionable associations, and potential mental health challenges. On June 20, 2021, at 6:48 p.m., a 911 dispatcher received a distress call from a woman who managed to convey that she was injured and claimed Valerie shot her. Although it's unclear whether the woman provided her address or if the police traced the call, officers from the Fort Wayne Police Department arrived at Shelby's residence shortly after. Upon arrival, the officers forced entry into the residence and found Shelby barely conscious, suffering from multiple gunshot wounds, and surrounded by a large pool of blood. One officer stayed with Shelby while the others conducted a protective sweep of the residence to ensure no other victims were present and that the perpetrator was not still inside. They did this while waiting for an ambulance and local firefighters to arrive. During this time, the officers attempted to provide first aid, and a surgeon asked Shelby if she knew who had shot her. Shelby identified Valerie as the attacker. Emergency medical personnel soon took over Shelby's care, rushing her to the nearby hospital, where she was in critical condition, but still alive. Meanwhile, Shelby's family was informed of the incident, and Fort Wayne Police Department officers began gathering evidence from her home. A doorbell camera was a significant piece of evidence, and after reviewing its footage, a person of interest was identified, though details were not publicly disclosed at the time. In a remarkable coincidence, a disturbing incident took place the day after Shelby's critical injury, approximately 50 kilometers away in Ohio. At around 10:30 a.m., the local police department received multiple calls about a suspicious-looking young woman lurking around a convenience store at a gas station. According to eyewitnesses, she had been wandering around the store and near the gas pumps for about an hour, seemingly trying to catch a glimpse of customers' credit card numbers as they made their purchases. Furthermore, the police had already received a prior call from a man who reported seeing the same woman earlier at the convenience store, claiming that she had pointed a gun at his back. After taking precautions, police officers arrived at the gas station where they found the woman and arrested her without any violence. The 22-year-old woman was identified as Valerie Rose Hardick. She had a 9mm handgun on her, which was the same type of weapon used in the attack on Shelby. Shelby had already identified her attacker as Valerie, which made the police even more certain they had the right person. The car Valerie was driving was the same one captured on Shelby's doorbell camera, leaving the scene just before Shelby called for help. Although the investigation is ongoing, Valerie was taken into custody and transferred to the county jail, where she will await her court hearing in the local municipal court. Shelby was clinging to life after being gravely injured by 89mm bullet wounds to her chest and abdomen. Doctors placed her in an induced coma and did everything they could to save her. Unfortunately, 3 days after the brutal attack on June 22, 2021, Shelby's body gave in to the injuries, and she was pronounced dead. According to her mother and media reports, Shelby died after undergoing 4 complex abdominal surgeries that did not yield the desired results. She received 20 blood transfusions, but the medical outlook was always bleak. If Shelby had survived, doctors believed her legs would have needed to be amputated. The brutal murder raises questions about what could drive someone to commit such a heinous crime. According to the limited information available, investigators attributed the motive to jealousy. It is alleged that Shelby was dating a man who Valerie was strongly attached to, although his identity was not revealed. Valerie was charged with criminal assault and aggravated threats. Initially held in Ohio on a $100,000 bail for threatening a man with a firearm at a gas station, Valerie was later transferred to Allen County to face charges for Shelby's murder. Shelby Von Holt's remains were memorialized in a private ceremony at a funeral home on June 29, 2021, and then cremated. In early 2022, Valerie Rose Hardick entered a plea deal in connection with Shelby's murder. Hardick pleaded guilty, citing mental illness as a defense. As part of the deal, the prosecution dropped a charge related to the use of a firearm during the crime, which could have added 20 years to her sentence. In September 2022, Hardick's sentencing hearing took place in the Superior Court of Allen County. As agreed, she pleaded guilty but mentally ill. During the hearing, her defense attorney presented mitigating circumstances, including her difficult upbringing, marked by her stepmother's death, abuse by her stepbrother, and a history of mental health issues. However, the prosecutors emphasized the jealousy motive behind Shelby's murder and highlighted Hardick's criminal history, which had escalated over time. They also noted that Hardick was on probation at the time of the murder, having been part of an alternative program due to previous charges. Throughout the hearing, Valerie's behavior was inconsistent. At times, she seemed coherent and fully aware of the situation, but at other moments, she appeared nervous, distracted, and even smiled at Shelby's family. Despite this, she answered the court's questions accurately. Although the exact content of her statements was not specified in media reports, it was noted that she never expressed remorse or apologized to Shelby's family. Shelby's parents, on the other hand, poignantly conveyed their profound loss during their victim impact statements. Shelby's father reminisced about his daughter's love for symbolic icons like peace signs and how she was still finding her way in life at the time of her murder. He reflected on Valerie's demeanor during her guilty plea, stating that her voice conveyed a lack of remorse. The grieving father asserted that by admitting to intentionally killing Shelby, Valerie seemed to take pride in her crime, which demonstrated a clear lack of regret. Toby expressed his belief that there was more to the story behind Valerie's motivation for killing Shelby than just jealousy, and he referenced the defense's argument about Valerie's mental health issues. Shelby's father pointed out that many people in prison have mental health issues, and he vowed to continue seeking answers about the tragedy. In a heartfelt reflection, Toby noted that there were 2 tragedies in this case. The first was the shocking and agonizing death of his daughter, and the second was Valerie's decision to throw away her future in a fit of rage. He acknowledged that Valerie's children would greatly suffer as a result. It was revealed that Valerie, who was 22 years old, had at least 2 children, although no further details about them were publicly disclosed. The grieving father said that the tragedy wouldn't stop at the graveyard or in the courtroom, because true justice couldn't be achieved in such a tragic situation. However, he said he had forgiven Valerie in order to find peace within himself, which he believed was guided by his faith in Christ. He was confident that Shelby was with God and reiterated his deep love for her. Shelby's mother, Shauna, also spoke about her feelings. She remembered her daughter as a princess from the day she was born, describing her as a kind spirit who would always help a friend, no matter the distance. Shauna vowed to attend all possible appeal hearings that Valerie's defense might initiate in the future. She shared the pain of remembering her lifeless daughter and the helplessness she felt, unable to protect her. All she could do was lay her head on Shelby's chest as her daughter lay in a medically induced coma. She publicly praised her daughter's courage, saying that Shelby had managed to name her attacker twice and fought hard for her life after being attacked. Shauna detailed the severe injuries Shelby suffered, explaining that her heart was racing at an unsustainable pace. Although Shelby's medical expenses totaled nearly $500,000, Shauna didn't seek compensation because they were waived following her death. The funeral expenses alone were around $115,000, but Shauna emphasized that she didn't expect to receive any compensation and didn't want any money from Valerie. Holding back tears, Shelby's mother poignantly expressed that memories were all she had left, and she wished she could trade places with her daughter. She noted that some days, the grief was so intense that she couldn't muster the strength to get up. After the legal representatives finished their presentations and the victim's family statements, the court awaited the judge's verdict. Under Indiana law, the sentence could range from a minimum of 45 years to a maximum of 65 years, with an average of 55 years. Valerie's defense team requested the minimum sentence, citing various mitigating factors, while the prosecution sought the maximum sentence. Before making his decision, the judge pointed out that it was clear the murder was planned in advance, and Valerie was fully aware of her actions. Her decision to flee to Ohio further supported this. While the judge acknowledged that Valerie had a difficult upbringing, marked by inadequate education, personal traumas, and mental health issues, he emphasized that she already had a growing criminal record at the time of Shelby's murder, including pending charges for a separate crime. Despite her past attempts at rehabilitation, her criminal history and lack of success in those attempts meant her traumatic past could not be used as an excuse. Taking these factors into account, the judge sentenced the 23-year-old Valerie to the maximum possible sentence of 65 years in prison. He also ordered the destruction of the weapon used in the murder. According to the American Correctional System's records, Valerie is currently incarcerated in an Indiana women's prison, with the earliest estimated release date being June 18, 2027, at which time she will be 72 years old. After the court session, Shelby's parents said they were satisfied with the verdict. However, they later made it clear that no verdict could ease their pain, especially since Valerie would be spending her days in prison. Shelby's mother emphasized that she would always miss and remember her daughter. This case is particularly notable because the victim, who was mortally wounded, was able to identify her killer. A prosecutor not involved in the case explained that when a dying victim identifies their attacker, this is known as a dying declaration. These statements provide a crucial lead for detectives and are the only exception to the hearsay rule in court trials, ensuring that the most reliable evidence is presented. The prosecutor also stressed that dying declarations are admissible in court because they tend to produce more trustworthy statements, given the immense pressure and tragic circumstances surrounding them. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Rosanna Galliano. Rosanna Galliano was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in the late 1970s. She was the youngest child, with two older brothers, Oscar and Gustavo, and a sister, Monica. Her parents were Raldo and Graciela. While details of her childhood and teenage years are scarce, it's known that she finished high school in the late 1990s. During this time, her father, Raldo, worked as a mechanic. In early 2001, Jose Arce visited Raldo's workshop, where he met Rosanna. Born on November 22, 1948, Jose had spent over 30 years living abroad, including time in Greece and the United States, where he was imprisoned for 4 years for drug trafficking. He returned to Argentina in 1996, owning 8 properties in a posh area of Buenos Aires. Jose and Rosanna started dating quickly after meeting at her father's shop, where he brought his vintage car for repairs. Despite their significant age difference, Jose appeared financially stable, thanks to his mother Elsa, who still lived in the United States. When 52-year-old Jose proposed to 22-year-old Rosanna, her mother Graciela expressed concerns about their age difference. Jose argued that age was not an obstacle to love, and Graciela turned to Rosanna for reassurance. Rosanna confirmed her desire to marry him in a whisper. The couple got married on November 17, 2001, just 7 months after meeting. Jose attributed his cheerful, modern, and smart personality to winning Rosanna over. They soon had a son named Gono, but problems began to emerge soon after. Jose was a controlling and jealous partner who frequently belittled Rosanna and her family. The emotional abuse escalated into physical violence, leaving Rosanna feeling trapped and terrified. Jose's intimidating presence, reinforced by his possession of 2 guns, allowed him to maintain control, a situation that Rosanna's family was painfully aware of. He would often flaunt his guns when they had visitors, or when he visited others. On one occasion, Rosanna's brother Oscar witnessed Jose physically assaulting her while they were painting their house, telling her to shut up before hitting her. Another time, Rosanna's father noticed bruises on her back, and she revealed that Jose had dragged her across the pavement. Despite these challenges, Rosanna and Jose had their second child, and Rosanna tried to make the relationship work, hoping to provide a stable home for their children. However, her efforts were consistently thwarted by Jose's temper and disrespectful behavior. Moreover, Jose's mother Elsa exerted control over their household from a distance, making decisions about their lives during her brief visits to Argentina. By 2006, Rosanna had reached her breaking point after enduring years of unbearable abuse, and she finally found the courage to report Jose for domestic violence. Her family, however, remained largely oblivious to the full extent of her suffering. Months later, Rosanna filed a second complaint, which included a request for a medical examination to document her injuries. It was then that she confided in her sister Monica, and the two made a pact to stay in close contact, reaching out to each other whenever something happened. Monica became Rosanna's safe haven and primary source of support, providing a refuge from the unbearable realities of life with Jose. Rosanna would often visit Monica's apartment with her children, though Jose would dictate when they had to return, frequently backing up his demands with death threats. Rosanna made the difficult decision to move in with Monica and the children, leaving Jose to stay in his own home. After a period of time, Rosanna took further action by filing another complaint and seeking a divorce, which resulted in a restraining order being issued against Jose. From then on, the only times they met were during child visitation sessions at a neutral location in El Remanso Exal de la Cruz, as arranged by the court. Rosanna confided in her neighbor, Daniel Gonzalez, a married father of one who worked as a gardener. Rumors began to circulate about a possible romantic relationship between Rosanna and Daniel, although this was never confirmed. Meanwhile, Jose's threats persisted, and Rosanna shared a chilling voicemail with her brother Oscar, in which Jose casually spoke about killing her in mid-2007 while socializing with friends at a bar. Rosanna met Oscar Lugo, a 32-year-old man from Marino who worked in a sewing workshop. They quickly became close, exchanging phone numbers and starting a romantic relationship. Oscar was an old-fashioned gentleman who treated Rosanna with kindness, attention, and listened to her, which was a welcome change after all the turmoil she had faced. By December 2007, Oscar had become a part of Rosanna's holiday celebrations, even dressing up as Santa Claus to delight her 2 sons. However, their happiness was threatened by Jose, who was keeping a close eye on Rosanna's every move and was aware of her new relationship. The looming divorce had panicked him. Jose tried to persuade Rosanna to end things with Oscar by offering her a truck, but she refused. When Rosanna had a severe nervous breakdown, it was Oscar who accompanied her to the hospital, not Jose. Running out of options, Jose, with the help of his mother Elsa, concocted a plan to hire a hitman, whose identity remains unknown. On January 16, 2008, Rosanna and her sister Monica went to El Rano to pick up her sons, aged 4 and 3. However, Jose delayed the handover, making excuses. At 9:15 p.m., Jose called Rosanna, claiming that Geronimo had a fever and that he would take him to the hospital and return him the next day. But Rosanna insisted on taking care of Geronimo herself and asked for the children to be returned. The call was brief, and Rosanna then went back inside. Around 10 p.m., Rosanna sent Oscar Lugo a casual text about their plans for the next day. Later, at 10:50 p.m., Rosanna and Monica sat down for dinner when Jose called again, unleashing a deadly trap. Rosanna stepped out into the garden to improve the reception, but a shadowy figure emerged from behind the trees and shot her 4 times with a .45 caliber gun. Monica, hearing the shots, screamed as Rosanna staggered and fell. Panicked, Monica tried calling 911, but the call wouldn't go through. She then asked her boyfriend to alert the police. Meanwhile, Oscar Lugo, oblivious to the events, attempted to contact Rosanna at 11 p.m., but got no response. He then tried to reach Monica, but she didn't answer. The police investigation revealed that the shooter had entered from an adjacent vacant lot. A witness reported seeing someone fleeing through a gap in the fence, but couldn't provide a clear description due to the darkness. Jose was left stunned after being questioned and subsequently requested a lawyer to take over the proceedings before departing the following day. Meanwhile, a red sweater was discovered during further searches, which Rosanna's relatives identified as belonging to Jose, solidifying his position as the prime suspect in their minds. The case garnered widespread media attention, sending shockwaves throughout the country and sparking a scandal as Jose and his mother publicly proclaimed his innocence, while also making disparaging remarks about Rosanna and suggesting that her multiple lovers should be investigated instead. After the incident, Daniel the gardener became reclusive, shunning all human contact. On the night of Rosanna's funeral, Raldo observed Jose lurking in the distance, watching from his truck without offering condolences or joining the mourners. Jose's defense strategy later focused on discrediting Monica, Rosanna's sister, and the sole witness by raising questions about her behavior, such as why her clothes bore no blood stains and why she had prioritized calling for help over assisting her sister. However, this theory lacked credibility, and the investigators countered that the murder weapon was too heavy for a woman to wield. The detectives also highlighted a crucial point. Anyone familiar with the house would know that Rosanna had to venture outside to get a cell signal, suggesting a high degree of premeditation in the crime. During the investigation, Rosanna's sons were cared for by their father and grandmother Elsa, while their grandmother Graciela was granted limited access. In contrast, Monica and Oscar were denied access, with Jose citing safety concerns for his sons, despite the legal restrictions. The children longed to see their Aunt Monica, prompting Jose to occasionally allow supervised visits. Monica seized these opportunities to take the children to see a psychologist. Eventually, Graciela successfully obtained visitation rights, although she was denied guardianship. In a contemporaneous interview, Jose claimed that Rosanna had 4 lovers, all of whom had criminal records. According to Jose, Rosanna engaged in intimate relationships with these men to uncover their secrets, which she then leveraged to blackmail them for personal gain. Meanwhile, following threats, Oscar was placed under police protection as a protected witness in his sister's case, requiring him to wear a tracking bracelet. As 2007 drew to a close, investigators still lacked concrete evidence to bring charges against any of the suspects. However, a significant breakthrough came a year after the murder, when Jose was arrested in January 2008, charged with aggravated homicide due to their romantic relationship, premeditation, and the alleged involvement of multiple perpetrators. 4 years after the attack, Oscar exercised his visitation rights to take his nephews to play soccer, sharing a heartwarming hug with the 6- and 7-year-old boys. In April 2013, the trial commenced. Jose maintained his innocence during the May proceedings, but the trial was delayed when he suffered a stroke, ultimately pushing the final verdict to November 2013. The judges concluded that the murder was meticulously planned, bearing the hallmarks of organized crime. Jose and Elsa were found to have chosen the time and place for the attack, aware that a phone call would lure Rosanna outside, rendering her vulnerable. The court determined that financial motives drove the murder, as Jose sought to avoid splitting the marital assets. Jose and Elsa received life imprisonment sentences. The higher court upheld the conviction, citing Jose's threats, the domestic violence endured by Rosanna, and the dominant influence of his mother. The actual perpetrators of the shooting were never identified. In 2015, Jose and Elsa were placed under house arrest, with Jose's health and Elsa's age cited as reasons, allowing the children to reunite with them. The media continued to follow the children's story for years, during which Monica and Graciela had no contact with them. The boys were shuffled between homes familiar to their father, but unknown to Rosanna's family. In January 2017, the court granted the children a weekend visit with their maternal grandparents for the first time. The Galliano family prepared their home with fresh paint, a thorough cleaning, and decorations, and Graciela cooked their favorite dish. That weekend, the Galliano home was filled with joy as the boys played soccer, video games, and even asked to sleep in their grandmother's bed, whom they hadn't seen in over 2 years. On November 24, 2018, Jose passed away after another stroke. The event was another devastating blow for the children, who attended their father's funeral. During the funeral, they expressed their concerns about their future to their Aunt Monica, who reassured them with calmness and love, promising to support whatever they decided. They chose to live with Monica, who then had to confront Elsa to communicate the boys' decision. Through these and many other instances, it was clear that Monica always prioritized her nephew's wishes, whether they wanted to talk or preferred silence. Monica's primary goal was to provide stability and comfort for the boys. In March 2019, Jono decided against switching schools, opting to stay close to his friends and see out his final 2 years. He returned to live with his grandmother, Elsa. Meanwhile, Monica pursued custody of Nahuan. Things appeared to be settling, but tragedy struck in late November 2019, when 87-year-old Elsa was hospitalized and shortly after, passed away on November 30th. The following month, Monica was awarded custody of Nahuan. By the end of the year, Jono had moved in with a family friend of his grandmother's. Both brothers still required psychological support to cope with their traumatic experiences, with Jono grappling with depression. Their psychologist acknowledged the staggering sequence of events they had endured. In March 2020, Jono's housemate passed away, prompting him to take refuge with his Aunt Monica until October of that year. When he turned 18, Geronimo rented a small apartment and began living independently, supported by the income generated from his inherited properties. Meanwhile, Monica initiated legal proceedings to secure their inheritance, fearing they might be stripped of their assets. Nahuan, on the other hand, demonstrated emotional stability thanks to the support he received, and was encouraged to continue attending therapy as needed. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ayla Reynolds. Ayla Reynolds was born in Waterville, Maine on April 4, 2010. A beautiful girl with blonde hair, blue eyes and a captivating smile, she adored music and dancing. Her parents, Trista Reynolds and Justin Dietro, had a brief romance in 2009, leading to Trista's pregnancy. Though initially surprised, Justin's resemblance to Ayla was undeniable. A paternity test in 2010 made him accept his parenthood. Consequently, in December, he was ordered to provide child support. Trista and Justin didn't have a custody agreement, but Trista, who lived in Portland, had primary custody of Ayla, thanks to an arrangement between them. Only in mid-2011, after Ayla's first birthday, did Justin start having visits with her. He lived an hour and a half away, and the encounters were during the day and very brief. They agreed he could occasionally take Ayla with him, but never overnight. After giving birth to Ayla, Trista became pregnant again with her fiancé Raymond's child. In 2011, Ayla welcomed a baby brother, Raymond Jr. However, Trista's life took a dramatic turn on October 13, 2011, when she had a run-in with Child Services. They issued her an ultimatum: get substance abuse treatment or risk losing custody of her children. Trista opted for rehab, leaving Ayla and Raymond Jr. in the care of her mom and sister, determined to reunite with them and avoid losing them permanently. By October 2011, Justin had met with Ayla around 5 to 10 times. However, just 4 days after Trista's funeral, on October 17th, Justin and his family suddenly decided to seek custody of Ayla. Justin's mother, Phoebe DePetro, got in touch with Child Protective Services and was granted permission to take Ayla into their care. The authorities quickly informed Trista's relatives of their decision. However, when Ayla's aunt was told she had to hand Ayla over, she strongly opposed the decision, alleging that Justin had a history of abusing the child. The officials countered that a father's custody rights take precedence over those of an aunt. Once permission was granted, Justin and his family went to pick up Ayla from her Aunt Jessica's house, but they didn't know the address. Child protection officials provided the location, and a police officer, Charles Weaver, accompanied Justin and his mother to the house. The paternal grandmother waited in the car while Justin and the officer went to the door. When they arrived, Jessica begged the officer not to take Ayla away and warned that she wouldn't give her up willingly. The officer noted that Ayla seemed happy and carefree at first, laughing and playing. However, Jessica pointed out that Ayla's behavior changed dramatically when Justin approached. As soon as Ayla saw her father, she burst into tears and tried to get away from him. Despite this, the officer took Ayla from Jessica and handed her over to Justin. The child struggled and screamed, even trying to bite the officer when she was placed in her father's arms. Jessica told Officer Charles that Ayla was terrified of Justin and that they couldn't take her away from her. Charles explained that he sympathized, but as a police officer, he had to enforce the directive from Child Services, and it wasn't his decision to make. To clarify, if Justin had wanted primary physical custody of Ayla, he would have needed to either reach an agreement with her mother or go through a court process to get a judge's approval. However, as we saw in the custody exchange, there was no agreement or court involvement. Instead, a Child Protective Services supervisor made a judgment, but failed to consider the mother's own arrangements for the child to stay with her relatives during her temporary absence. Before a court grants a parent exclusive physical custody, they typically evaluate the situation thoroughly, including background checks and home visits, which did not happen in Ayla's case. In custody cases, the child's best interest should always come first. However, there was reportedly no evidence to support the decision that was made. Many analysts believe that only an imminent danger to the child's safety could outweigh the stability and continuity of staying with her maternal relatives. If Child Protective Services officials believed Ayla was at risk, it's unclear why they only removed Ayla and not her little brother Raymond as well. The father took Ayla to his childhood home in Waterville, where he lived with his mother Phoebe, 47, his sister Alicia, 24, and her baby daughter Gabriella, who, like Ayla, was an infant at the time. Justin, 25, lived in the partially finished basement, a single large room, while the rest of the family occupied the upstairs area. During Trista's rehabilitation, she called Justin every day to speak with Ayla and ensure everything was going smoothly. She did not perceive any warning signs during these conversations. On October 20th, 2011, coinciding with the 8th day of Trista's treatment, a meeting was held to discuss Ayla's case. Attendees included Child Protective Services members, 2 doctors, Trista, her sister Jessica, and their lawyer, as well as Justin, who participated via phone. This meeting resulted in an agreement that Ayla would be returned to her mother on October 22, 2011, upon Trista's completion of the addiction recovery program. It was also agreed that Justin would bring Ayla to the treatment center for a visit on the 21st. Things were going well for Trista, but the situation was about to take a turn. None of the established agreements were fulfilled, leaving Trista desperate to regain custody of her daughter. She repeatedly reached out to Child Protective Services for assistance in enforcing the agreement, but to no avail. As a result, Trista sought a temporary compromise with Justin. He would continue to care for the child, and she would receive regular visitation rights. On November 12, 2011, Justin took the girl to the emergency room. Following a thorough examination, doctors diagnosed a broken bone in one of her joints, specifically the elbow joint that connects the upper arm to the elbow. Justin claimed the accident had occurred the previous night, on November 11th, stating that he slipped and fell on her while holding Ayla on the porch during a rainstorm. According to him, although she cried, there were no visible injuries, and it wasn't until the next morning that it became apparent she required urgent medical attention. By the next Monday, the orthopedist concluded that surgery would not be necessary, and the injury would likely heal on its own. A week later, on November 26th, the specialist reported during the third medical appointment that the child's progress was as expected. Trista attended this medical consultation to closely monitor her daughter's recovery, unaware that it would be the last time she would hold her in her arms. From that point on, the situation quickly deteriorated. Frustrated by the ongoing disputes over custody, visitation rights, and even her right to talk to her daughter on the phone, Trista decided to take action. On December 15, 2011, she filed court papers to initiate legal proceedings to gain full physical custody of Ayla. On Saturday, December 17th, 2 days later, Justin contacted the police in the morning to report that Ayla was missing from his mother's house, where he was living with his girlfriend Courtney Roberts and his sister Alicia. According to him, they had put the 20-month-old girl to bed the previous night, and when they woke up early that morning, she was no longer there. Trista was on her way to visit her boyfriend Raymond in a coastal city in Maine, just 50 miles from the Canadian border, when she received devastating news. She was dozing in the passenger seat while her father-in-law, Robert, drove. Robert took a call from Trista's father, who informed him that Trista's baby, Ayla, was missing. The news left Robert frozen, and he searched for a safe place to stop the car and wake Trista. Groggy, Trista listened as her father's voice came through the phone, informing her that her baby's whereabouts were unknown. Desperate, Trista changed course, heading to meet the police who were searching for Ayla. The 90-minute journey felt like an eternity to Trista, who frantically called Justin to find out what had happened, but her calls went unanswered, leaving her terrified. When they arrived at the police station, both Trista and Robert gave statements to the authorities. About 30 minutes later, Trista's father joined them, visibly angry and distressed. It turned out that Justin had called 911 that morning at 8:49 to report Ayla's disappearance. He claimed the last time someone saw Ayla was around 10 p.m. the previous night, when his sister Alicia checked on her before bed. However, on Saturday morning, they discovered Ayla was no longer in her crib, but Justin didn't specify the exact time of her disappearance in the call. Justin suspected that an unknown intruder had kidnapped the toddler. The news of Ayla's disappearance spread rapidly, and the authorities quickly launched an investigation. The police chief addressed the media, assuring them that the case was being thoroughly investigated and that their primary objective was to find Ayla by any means. The police searched the house for any potential clues that could lead them to Ayla, facilitating their operation. Meanwhile, the family stayed with friends, and a command center was set up to coordinate the search efforts. On the third day, Monday, December 19th, the FBI was requested to assist in the search operation. By this point, 75 individuals from various agencies were involved in the efforts. The state police seized 2 vehicles from the Petro residence, a 1996 Ford Explorer, owned by Justin, and a 4-door silver sedan, owned by Justin's girlfriend Courtney, who was present on the night of Ayla's disappearance. The search for Ayla expanded with the FBI's child abduction team conducting door-to-door interviews. 75 officers worked tirelessly, investing 5,000 hours in 10 days, pursuing 330 leads. 50 civilian volunteers and a $30,000 reward aided the effort. Justin initially kept a low profile, avoiding media. However, he made more public appearances, including on the Today's Show, where he addressed the shift in law enforcement's message. He appealed to the perpetrator to return Ayla, emphasizing they had no right to keep her, and she needed to be with her family at home. Justin attributed his delayed cooperation to his initial naivety, having expected Ayla to return within a few weeks. He also stated that law enforcement had advised him to avoid the press, which was partially confirmed by the Department of Public Safety spokesperson. However, the spokesperson clarified that this guidance was only provided at the beginning of the investigation. Subsequently, the police actually encouraged Ayla's parents to remain in the public eye. Justin took the opportunity to respond to the insinuations against him, inviting the TV host to spend a day with him to gain first-hand experience of his situation. While he praised the police's efforts, he acknowledged that some of their methods were unpleasant. He emphasized that the truth remains the same, regardless of how many times he was asked the same questions and accused of lying, believing that the truth will eventually emerge. By the end of January, police discovered Ayla's blood in several areas of the DPO house and announced their findings. Although there was not enough evidence to make arrests, 3 adults, including Justin, Courtney, and Elisha, who lived in the residence where Ayla was last seen, were suspects. According to Stephen McCausland, spokesperson for the Department of Public Safety, the forensic evidence contradicted the family's story of what happened, making it highly unlikely that someone could have taken Ayla from her bedroom without one of the 3 adults in the house noticing. 6 months after Ayla's disappearance was reported on May 30th, 2012, the police announced that it was unlikely the little girl was still alive. Trista's family invited journalists into their home to watch the press conference where this news was delivered. Trista broke down in tears, and her grief soon turned to anger as she accused Justin of killing her baby. For Trista's family, learning the details of forensic tests conducted at Justin's family's house was extremely difficult. They already knew that Ayla's blood had been found, and they had been told the amount was equivalent to 25% of her blood volume. However, they had not seen the evidence until January 2013, when everything was finally revealed to them. The investigation uncovered disturbing evidence. The baby seat in Justin's 1996 Ford Explorer had Ayla's blood on the left shoulder strap. Dried gastric fluid was found on the back seats. In Ayla's bedroom, blood was discovered on her princess pink sneakers next to her crib, as well as on the face and arms of her doll. Investigators believed Ayla might have tried to wipe blood from her mouth with her toy. Additionally, a blood stain was found on the living room sofa. Most of the blood traces were found in the basement. On the mattress where Justin slept with Courtney, a pool of Ayla's blood was discovered. Nearby on the bed, vomit and an unidentified pink fiber, possibly from a toy, were found next to the sneakers stained with Ayla's blood on the tongue and inside. Additionally, splashes of blood were found on the cement floor around the bed and on the walls, with some of the splashes on the walls matching Ayla's height. An expert concluded that some of the blood drops, about the size of a dime, were indicative of trauma caused by a blunt object. The experts also determined that some blood spatter patterns in the house might have been coughed up by Ayla, suggesting that she had both internal and external injuries. The police found that bed linens had been used to clean up Ayla's blood. This information was horrific for Trista and her family to learn, and they soon discovered even more disturbing details. Officers warned Trista about disturbing evidence, then showed her luminol test results revealing hidden bloodstains at her house. She was devastated, fled the station in panic, and became convinced Ayla was murdered, declining to see more evidence. Justin showed no emotion when police showed him and the Petro family evidence months prior. The family they stayed with during the relocation also declined to see photos, citing disinterest. Justin's girlfriend, who was with him the night Ayla disappeared, had the same indifferent reaction to the findings. Trista spoke out 8 months after the 2013 ordeal, slam-dunking Justin, Alicia, and Courtney for being free and unbothered. In a blistering letter, she shared evidence and photos, refusing to wait for justice, vowing to revive public interest with or without law enforcement's backing. In 2016, journalists visited Justin's mom's house, meeting Alicia, Ayla's aunt. Queried about blood evidence, Alicia blamed Ayla's lactose intolerance, citing vomiting. However, internet research showed this was unlikely, as typical symptoms are gas, bloating, and diarrhea, not vomiting blood. In 2017, a judge granted Trista's request and formally declared Ayla legally deceased. The ruling stated that Ayla's death likely occurred on or around December 17, 2011, the day her father, Justin, reported her missing. With this ruling in place, Trista and her legal team pursued a wrongful death lawsuit against Justin, alleging that his intentional and unlawful actions led to Ayla's death, and that he subjected her to pain, terror, and physical harm prior to her passing. Trista held a press conference, confronting her deceased daughter's father after he denied wrongdoing in a lawsuit. She questioned his conscience, saying she saw the truth in his eyes and believed he knew it was a problem. In 2023, a judge granted Trista's request to add Phoebe and Elisha as defendants in the wrongful death lawsuit. The 3 defendants now face civil charges for wrongful death, conscious pain and suffering, and unlawfully interfering with a deceased person's body. Additionally, Justin is charged with breaching his parental duty to care for a minor child. Trista and her lawyer knew they wouldn't get money from Justin. They wanted to uncover the truth about Ayla's disappearance. It was suspicious, with Justin driving to Portland and back, claiming to search for Ayla, but never contacting Trista or her family. He had bought a $25,000 life insurance policy for Ayla weeks before. It's bizarre that Justin stayed at a friend's house while detectives investigated Ayla's disappearance. This is especially surprising, given that Justin had barely been involved in his baby's life during the 9 months of pregnancy, and most of her life. Trista also shared that she received strange messages from Justin in the week after he took Ayla, in which he expressed fear that someone might kidnap or snatch her. He had made similar comments around December 11th, 6 days before her disappearance was reported. However, after Ayla went missing, those messages took on a threatening and confusing tone. Trista admitted that she had always been perplexed by their meaning. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Timothy Jones Jr. Timothy Jones Jr. and Amber Kaiser, a divorced couple, had 5 children together, all under the age of 9, Mara Grace, Elias, Xavier, Nathalie, Gabrielle Asher, and Elaine Marie. The family lived in Lexington, South Carolina. When they first met as teenagers, Amber was attracted to Timothy's world and felt a strong connection to him and his way of life. They got married young, and while Timothy pursued his education in Mississippi, Amber dedicated herself to being a homemaker. Timothy grew up with a mother who struggled with schizophrenia, which gradually worsened over time. She eventually needed constant care. When Timothy's father was just 20 years old, he took Timothy to live with his grandmother. There, Timothy was exposed to a troubled environment marked by domestic violence, substance abuse, and alcoholism. Despite a tough upbringing, Timothy displayed a natural aptitude for numbers, effortlessly solving math problems, and disassembling and reassembling computers with ease. However, His life took a dramatic turn when he entered adolescence and began experiencing auditory hallucinations. At the age of 10, Timothy started using drugs and drinking excessively, and at 15, he suffered a traumatic brain injury in a car accident. This injury affected his frontal lobe, the area of the brain responsible for regulating impulses, which is also linked to psychopathic tendencies. Following the accident, Timothy's behavior became increasingly erratic and stubborn. He grew intensely jealous of his father, feeling threatened by anyone who had a relationship with him, believing they were taking away his father's attention. Over time, Timothy became convinced that his father didn't love him and harbored a deep-seated fear of abandonment. After completing high school, Timothy aspired to join the elite U.S. Navy SEALs, but he lacked the required athletic talent and discipline, leading to his eventual expulsion from the training program due to substance abuse. In 2001, Timothy Jones Jr. was sentenced to a year in a labor camp at an Illinois state prison. When he was released, he appeared to have undergone a significant transformation, with religion becoming a central guiding force in his life. At an amusement park in Chicago, he met Amber, the woman who would become the mother of his children, and they quickly decided to get married, in accordance with the rigid expectations of Timothy's Pentecostal church. At the time of their marriage, Amber was 19 years old, and Timothy was 22. Soon after, Amber became aware of the church's strict rules, which prohibited women from cutting their hair, wearing pants, makeup, or jewelry. Timothy believed in the principle that women should submit to their husbands and have many children. Timothy was a devout individual who dedicated his life to the church. Despite many people warning him against taking the Bible too literally, he remained committed to his faith. He and his spouse had 3 children in quick succession: Mara, Elias, and Nathan, each born a year apart. As their family grew, they relocated to Mississippi, where Timothy earned a degree in computer science and engineering from the state university with highest honors. Throughout this period, Timothy Jones Jr. successfully balanced his marital life, parenthood, and various jobs. His family was incredibly proud of him, recognizing Timothy as a remarkable genius with a bright future. Timothy's life seemed to be progressing smoothly. He secured a job at Intel as a computer chip manufacturer, which his wife Amber saw as a means to a better life. Having lived in student housing in Mississippi, they aspired to raise their 3 children in a larger house and even considered hiring a nanny. Timothy's dream of living on a farm led him to buy a rundown trailer on a dirt road in Red Bank. He purchased animals to raise, and Amber stayed at home to care for the kids and the animals. The problem was that Amber was isolated, with no car and no driving skills in this rural area. By 2012, they had 2 more children, and problems started to surface. Timothy questioned whether he was the father of their youngest daughter, Elaine. He also wanted Amber to homeschool the kids. Despite her limited education, she only finished high school. Amber, who already felt lonely with no nearby family, and her husband's family living far away in Mississippi, felt even more inferior to her intelligent and educated husband. Tensions rose when Timothy accused Amber of having an affair with their neighbor. Their marriage began to fall apart, and they considered getting a divorce. Timothy wanted sole custody of the children, so he visited a therapist and asked for a statement to give to his divorce lawyer, claiming he was capable of raising the children on his own. Amber, who didn't have a lawyer and was unsure of what to do, eventually decided it would be best for the children to stay with their father, as she was unemployed and lacked education. As the primary breadwinner, Timothy was granted full custody, and Amber was allowed to visit the children regularly. She left her husband and children behind. However, Timothy's mental state began to deteriorate. Haunted by his failed marriage, he started using drugs and drinking again, struggling with the voices in his head. He became easily provoked over minor issues, and Amber reported that he had once beaten her in front of their children until she lost consciousness. As Timothy struggled to balance work and taking care of the children, he hired a nanny service despite his own instability. The first 2 nannies observed that his home was spotless, and he was dedicated and attentive to his children. Later, he switched services and hired 17-year-old Crystal, who had a young daughter of her own. Timothy soon began an affair with the nanny and attempted to convert her to his religion, insisting she adopt the church's customs, such as wearing long dresses, growing her hair out, and submitting to his authority. When Crystal refused, their relationship began to fall apart. Crystal later stated that Timothy was extremely harsh towards his children, making them stand on their toes for hours, because he believed punishment was necessary to purify their sick bodies. She left after catching him trying to hit her young daughter. After Crystal's departure, Timothy hired another nanny who noticed a significant change in him. His previously clean home was now filthy, filled with trash, dirty clothes, and infested with cockroaches. Over time, Timothy Jones Jr. became increasingly violent, punishing his children daily. He started feeding them only oatmeal throughout the day, limiting them to 1 meal. In August 2014, the nanny contacted South Carolina's social services to report the neglect and abuse in Timothy's home. She described the lack of food and the physical abuse the children suffered. The abuse was so severe that the teachers at the elementary school attended by the older children had previously reported it to the agency months earlier. The agency had required Jones to sign a written promise never to mistreat or hit his children again, as they often arrived at school with bruises. On the afternoon of Thursday, August 28, 2014, Timothy picked up his 3 older children from elementary school and his 2 younger ones from the nanny around 7 p.m. Timothy became enraged about some broken outlets in their mobile home. He questioned his 6-year-old son Nathan about the damage, and when Nathan denied any involvement, Timothy forced Nathan to do push-ups, squats, and other exercises repeatedly, while whipping him with a belt whenever he slowed down. Amber, Timothy's ex-wife, called to talk to her kids. During the call, Nathan told his mom about the punishment he got for breaking some outlets, saying it was an accident. Timothy got angry, ended the call, and told Amber to stop protecting Nathan. After hours of being punished, Nathan was extremely tired, dehydrated, and begging for it to stop. He passed out, and Timothy carried him to bed, leaving him alone without water or any help. Phone records show that Amber tried to call back 8 more times, but Timothy didn't answer. Around 1 a.m., Timothy searched for a specific scene from the movie American History on YouTube, even though he knew Nathan was already unconscious. At around 1 a.m., Timothy took his 8-year-old daughter Mia to a local store to buy 10 packs of cigarettes. When they got back home, Timothy grabbed Mia and started choking her. Then he went to his 7-year-old son Elias and did the same thing. After that, he took off his belt and went to his 2-year-old son Gabriel and 1-year-old daughter Elaine, putting the belt around their necks and pulling until they stopped breathing. Seeing that the kids weren't moving, Timothy took their sheets and blankets, wrapped each of them separately, and put them in the back seat of his car. On Friday, August 29th, Jones's father called him at 7:43 a.m., but got no response. Later, at 9:36 a.m., the nanny tried calling Jones and finally got through to him on her second attempt. She asked if he would be taking the younger kids to daycare, and he told her not to worry, saying he would take them the following week, explaining that they were currently out of town and would return by Tuesday. Between noon and 2 p.m. that day, Jones drove around, searching online for out-of-state drugs. At 1:27 p.m., he was near Alabama, but he ignored his grandmother's multiple calls, totaling 23 attempts between 3 and 5 p.m. During this time, Jones also searched online for tobacco shops in Alabama and Mississippi, as well as campsites in South Carolina. His location was recorded in Georgia at 8:04 p.m. The next day, August 30th, his grandmother continued sending messages, asking why he wasn't responding to her calls. Then, on August 31st, his phone's location was recorded in Red Bank, New Jersey, at 10:08 a.m. Jones spent the day searching the internet for camping stores, RV parks, and landfills in South Carolina, as well as animal services. He also looked up 2 songs at 4:54 p.m. Timothy Jones Jr. received a reminder from the nanny to bring diapers when he dropped off Gabriel. An hour later, he responded, informing her that he had left South Carolina with the children to start anew, and asking her to clean the mobile home, giving her permission to take whatever she wanted from the belongings he left behind. On September 1st, Timothy was driving from one place to another. The next morning, at 10:35, he searched online for information on disposing of bodies in landfills, making muriatic acid, and camping near countries with no extradition laws, as he was facing legal issues and considering his escape options. Throughout the day, he received updates from the nanny, who had cleaned the mobile home. His boss at Intel also messaged him, inquiring about his work attendance, around 6 p.m. On the morning of September 3rd, a coworker called him twice, but Timothy did not respond. Later, surveillance video captured Timothy at a well-known store, purchasing a saw, muriatic acid, garbage bags, a 5-gallon bucket, and goggles at 3:37 a.m. He also searched online for information about his missing children. On September 4th at 6:33 a.m., Timothy Jones Jr.'s location was tracked to Charleston, South Carolina, where he deposited a check for $3,508 at a bank. The next day, on September 5th, his phone was briefly turned on in Louisville, Georgia, but his exact location was not recorded. On the morning of September 6th, Jones placed the decomposing bodies of his children in black plastic garbage bags and abandoned them in a clearing along a rural forest road in Alabama, which was recorded at 9:14 a.m. The bodies had been in the back seat of his vehicle since August 29th. Later that day, at around 7 p.m., Jones was stopped at a traffic checkpoint in Smith County, Mississippi. A police officer approached his vehicle and noticed a strong, unpleasant smell coming from inside, as well as apparent bleach stains on the carpet that suggested a recent cleaning attempt. When questioned about the whereabouts of his children, Jones initially denied having any children, then claimed he had 3 children who were in South Carolina. The officers asked for the phone numbers of his father, grandmother, and ex-wife to verify the children's safety, and after making the calls, they promptly arrested Jones. Jones felt overwhelmed with sorrow and anger when he caught one of his sons playing with an electrical outlet. In a fit of rage, he grabbed the boy by the neck and choked him until he lost consciousness. Later, he used a belt to discipline his other son, as his hands were too large to fit around the boy's neck. When his eldest daughter walked into the room and saw what was happening, Jones grabbed her and choked her with his hands until her face turned purple. After the incident, Jones put his son Nathan to bed, only to discover him dead when he checked on him later. During the investigation, Jones explained that he killed his children because he heard voices in his head, leading him to believe they were plotting against him. He also thought that they would be better off in heaven. During his attempted escape, Jones drove through the southeast with the bodies of his 5 children hidden under blankets in his car. He eventually dumped their bodies in a remote Alabama forest before being arrested by chance during a routine traffic stop in Mississippi. Timothy claimed it was an accident and said the punishment he imposed on Nathan went too far, leading to the boy's death from exhaustion caused by the strenuous exercises. When he found Nathan lifeless in his room, Timothy was overcome with panic and decided to kill all his children. The pathologist found it difficult to determine the exact cause of Nathan's death, but suggested that the excessive exercise had weakened him so much that it would have taken minimal force to end his life. The investigators were puzzled as to why Timothy didn't call for emergency services if he genuinely believed it was an accident. Instead, he attempted to hide and dispose of the children's bodies on the same day. Timothy eventually agreed to take the investigators to the location where he had hidden the bodies. On September 11th, authorities recovered the remains of Timothy Jones's 5 children. The evidence collected from his car was handed over to South Carolina authorities and included personal items, such as family photos, children's clothing, drawings by the children, letters written by their mother to the children, Timothy Jones's university diploma, and his passport. Additionally, handwritten notes by Jones were found, detailing to-do lists that included instructions on how to dispose of bodies, including grinding bones into powder or small pieces, and burning them. The lists also mentioned supplies needed, such as camping gear, gasoline, and muriatic acid. Upon his arrest on September 13, 2014, Jones was placed in a special isolation cell, away from the general prison population. Since then, he has undergone evaluation by various mental health professionals, including psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, and forensic experts. Although the experts' opinions differ, some have diagnosed Jones with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, or personality disorder. These experts suggest that Jones's mental state at the time of the crime might have been exacerbated by his drug use and a traumatic brain injury he suffered at the age of 15, which could have contributed to an underlying psychotic condition. In late May 2019, Timothy Jones Jr. was tried for a crime considered one of the worst murders in South Carolina's history. The trial featured weeks of intense testimonies and evidence presented against him. After only 2 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a verdict on June 13, 2019, sentencing Jones Jr. to death. Currently, he is being held in solitary confinement at a correctional institution, where he wears a green jumpsuit that distinguishes him as a death row inmate.